Marcus Thorne woke every morning to the smell of coffee and old case files. The scent had become ritual over 5 years as AlphaKing, a reminder that justice required diligence more than dominance. Most alphas led through raw power and territorial aggression. Marcus had learned in 20 years as an Army Ranger that real authority came from competence, from the methodical dismantling of corruption, piece by careful piece. His phone buzzed at 0530 hours display, glowing in the pre-dawn darkness of Stormhaven's royal quarters. The message carried Danny Cross's signature brevity ironwood inspection scheduled. Anonymous tip Reese Silversmith Records. Departure 0800. Marcus rolled out of bed and reached for his running shoes. The tip itself wasn't unusual. His enforcement division received dozens monthly, most proving baseless paranoia or petty pack politics. But something about this one had triggered Danny's instincts, and after 25 years of brotherhood that began in Ranger selection, Marcus trusted those instincts more than most written reports. The morning run through Stormhaven's perimeter carried the sharp bite of Pacific Northwest autumn. 42 years old, and Marcus could still maintain the pace that had earned him his tab, though these days the run served meditation more than conditioning. His wolf stirred beneath skin, content with the rhythm, the solitude, the preparation for whatever Ironwood held. Ironwood Pack sat 3 hours south along the Oregon-Washington border, a mid-sized territory of roughly 800 wolves, known primarily for timber production and stubborn adherence to traditional pack structures. Marcus had visited twice in his tenure as AlphaKing routine inspections that revealed nothing remarkable beyond the usual resistance to his reformed enforcement policies. Alpha Henrik Stone ran a stable operation, if somewhat rigid in governance. The elders maintained strong influence, which wasn't uncommon in older packs, though Marcus had learned to watch those situations carefully. Too much elder authority often masked institutional rot. The tip had arrived through encrypted channels 3 days prior, originating from an IP address that pinged across 4 different proxy servers before landing in Danny's secure inbox. The message contained 11 words: check Ironwood Silversmith Commission records, multiple projects for Elder Council, urgent. Danny had run the usual verification protocols, searching for signs of manipulation or rival pack interference. The digital forensics revealed nothing beyond careful operational security from someone who understood both technology and the risks of whistleblowing in pack society. Whoever sent the tip wanted anonymity more than credit, which typically indicated genuine concern rather than political maneuvering. Marcus returned from his run to find his enforcement team assembled in Stormhaven's Tactical Operations Center, a converted warehouse that maintained the aesthetic of military precision Danny insisted upon. Maps covered one wall, digital displays tracking pack territories across the northern jurisdiction. Victor Kane hunched over a medical workstation in the corner, reviewing what appeared to be toxicology reports. Sarah Chen stood at the main conference table, organizing physical files with the methodical efficiency of her FBI years. Danny looked up from his laptop coffee mug, bearing a faded Ranger scroll insignia. His gray-shot beard and weathered face belonged to someone who'd seen too much combat and learned to process it through dark humor and unwavering loyalty. 45 years old, still built like someone who could ruck march 20 miles with full kit, though these days his expertise lay in logistics and evidence management rather than direct action. Morning, boss. Victor pulled historical medical records for Ironwood Pack's standard procedure for inspections. Found something interesting. Victor straightened from his workstation, reading glasses perched on his nose, in a way that always made Marcus think of a grandfather, rather than the combat surgeon who'd once worked triage in Kandahar. 50 years old Omega presentation, but deadly competent, Victor had joined pack enforcement after discovering the shifter world existed beyond human medical practice. His civilian background gave him perspective most pack-born wolves lacked, particularly regarding institutional abuse patterns. 4 deaths over 20 years, all female shifters between ages 15 and 18. Causes listed as natural complications, organ failure, infection. But the progression doesn't match typical shifter physiology. Victor tapped his tablet, pulling up charts on the main display. Healthy adolescents don't develop systematic organ failure without underlying pathology. I requested deeper records, but hit authorization blocks at the elder level. Sarah moved to the display, her sharp eyes scanning the data with practiced efficiency. 38 years old, former FBI child crime specialist, before discovering her beta wolf heritage through a case that went sideways, she'd brought investigative rigor to enforcement work that most pack-born wolves considered unnecessarily thorough. Marcus had learned to appreciate that thoroughness, especially in cases involving vulnerable pack members. Authorization blocks are red flags. If deaths were truly natural, medical records should be accessible for royal inspection. Her voice carried the flat professional tone of someone stating facts rather than opinions. Combined with the silversmith tip, we're looking at potential elder corruption. Question is scope and nature. Marcus studied the display pieces clicking together in the pattern recognition mindset that ranger training had honed. Anonymous tip about silversmith records. 4 dead young females. Elder authorization blocks on medical files. Individually, each element could have innocent explanations. Together, they painted something darker. Pack your gear. We're looking at 3 to 5 days on-site full inspection protocol. Sarah, I want you on witness interviews, anyone who knew these girls, particularly family members. Victor Medical Facilities are your priority, full records review with royal override if necessary. Danny Logistics and evidence chain of custody. I'll handle pack leadership and elder council directly. The drive to Ironwood took them through dense forests that Oregon preserved with aggressive environmental policies, 2-lane highways cutting through old-growth timber that predated modern pack territories. Marcus drove the lead SUV with Danny riding passenger, Sarah and Victor following in the support vehicle. They maintained radio contact but mostly traveled in companionable silence, the kind that came from working together through too many difficult cases to require constant communication. Danny finally spoke an hour into the drive, staring out at the passing tree line. You're doing the thing again. What thing? The thing where you've already decided something's wrong and you're 3 steps ahead building the case in your head. Seen it too many times. Afghanistan, that village elder who was skimming reconstruction funds. Remember. Marcus did remember. The elder had smiled and offered tea while children starved in homes 50 meters away. Corruption so normalized he'd seen nothing wrong with his actions. They'd built the case methodically over 2 weeks, documented every transaction, then watched local authorities handle prosecution with a thoroughness that occasionally surprised cynical American soldiers. 4 dead girls, Danny. Natural causes, my ass. Could be genetic condition. Rare blood disorder. Something legitimately medical that Victor's missing context for. Then why block records? Why anonymous tips about silversmith commissions? Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. We both know what this smells like. Danny was quiet for several miles, watching forests give way to more populated areas as they approached Ironwood territory. Yeah, we do. Just hoping we're wrong this time. They weren't wrong. Marcus knew it bone deep, the way he'd known contact was imminent in Helmand Province, the way his wolf could sense threat before conscious mind caught up. Something in Ironwood Pack had gone rotten, and 4 dead girls were just the visible symptoms of deeper disease. Ironwood's pack house emerged from surrounding timber like something from colonial American history, 3-story structure of weathered wood and stone that spoke to permanence and traditional values. The pack maintained extensive grounds, including ceremonial spaces and what appeared to be significant agricultural operations. Wolves moved through the area with purposeful efficiency, acknowledging the royal vehicles with the careful respect that mixed genuine deference with territorial wariness. Alpha Henrik Stone waited on the main steps, flanked by 2 beta enforcers and an elderly male Marcus recognized from previous visits as Elder Gerald Blackwood. Henrik presented, mid-40s strong alpha presence bearing that suggested military background, though records indicated he'd risen through pack hierarchy rather than outside service. His smile carried professional warmth that didn't quite reach his eyes. AlphaKing Thorn, welcome back to Ironwood. We received notification of your inspection yesterday, though we typically get more advance notice for royal visits. Marcus stepped from the vehicle, letting his own alpha presence expand just enough to establish the hierarchy without being overtly aggressive. Danny, Sarah, and Victor took positions behind him, unified team posture that communicated competence and purpose. This inspection was prompted by specific concerns requiring immediate attention. We'll need full access to pack records, medical facilities, and elder council documentation. My team will be conducting interviews with pack members, and I expect complete cooperation. Henrik's smile flickered, jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Of course, AlphaKing. though I'm curious what specific concerns would require such urgency. Ironwood maintains excellent compliance with territorial regulations. Elder Gerald stepped forward before Marcus could respond, moving with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority unchallenged. 67 years old, according to files, Gerald had served as elder for over 20 years, wielding influence that often superseded Henrik's formal alpha position. His presence carried weight beyond rank, the kind of power that came from shaping pack culture through generations of consistent messaging. AlphaKing, if there are concerns regarding Ironwood's governance, perhaps you could share specifics rather than conducting what appears to be a punitive investigation based on anonymous accusations. Marcus held Gerald's gaze, reading the challenge beneath diplomatic language. Elder Blackwood, my investigation methodologies aren't subject to pack approval. We'll begin with a tour of facilities followed by records review. You're welcome to observe, though your cooperation isn't optional. The elderly wolf's eyes narrowed, but he inclined his head with the bare minimum of respect. As you say, AlphaKing, though I trust you'll find Ironwood's record-keeping exemplary. They moved through Packhouse interior, Henrik providing tour guide commentary that hit the expected notes about pack history and community programs. Marcus noted details beyond the official narrative, the separation between pack leadership spaces and what appeared to be servants' quarters, the subtle hierarchy and how pack members responded to Henrik versus Gerald, the carefully maintained distance between upper and lower pack functions. Victor split off toward medical facilities. Sarah began identifying potential witnesses for interviews, and Danny established their temporary command post in guest quarters that offered privacy and secure communications. Marcus continued the facility tour with Henrik and Gerald, watching pack dynamics while maintaining the pretense of casual inspection. The smell hit him in the packhouse kitchen. Marcus had been half listening to Henrik's explanation of meal services and pack logistics when his wolf surged against his control of predator. Instincts triggering with sudden intensity. Burned flesh, silver toxicity, infection and rot beneath antiseptic attempts at concealment. The scent wasn't overwhelming. Someone had masked it with cleaning agents and careful ventilation, but to alpha senses attuned to threat detection, it registered like blood in water. He stopped mid-step, causing Henrik and Gerald to pause their commentary. What is that smell? Henrik's brow furrowed with apparent confusion. Smell, AlphaKing. I don't notice anything unusual. But Gerald had gone very still, the expression shifting from annoyed cooperation to something sharper. Marcus's wolf recognized the reaction prey animal, realizing the predator had caught the scent. Silver, burning, and beneath it infection. Marcus moved deeper into the kitchen area, following the trail past industrial stoves and preparation stations toward the back section, where staff worked in careful choreography. Where is it coming from? A young woman stumbled. She'd been carrying a tray of dishes, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone performing familiar tasks when her foot caught on uneven flooring. The tray tilted, dishes sliding, and she gasped, the sound carrying pain beyond simple surprise as she fell forward onto her hands and knees. The tray clattered across stone floor, ceramic shattering, and Marcus moved on instinct. His hands caught her shoulders before conscious thought engaged, steadying her weight as she struggled to rise. The smell intensified with proximity, burned flesh, silver poisoning the particular rot of wounds that couldn't heal properly. And beneath worn cloth wrapping around both wrists, metal gleamed dully. Are you injured? She looked up at him with eyes that had learned not to hope for intervention. Dark brown irises holding the flat acceptance of someone long past expecting rescue. Early 20s, maybe 22 or 23, though suffering had aged her beyond years. Malnourished, 20 pounds, underweight at minimum, moving with the careful precision of chronic pain management. The cloth wrappings on her wrists had shifted during her fall, revealing silver bands underneath, and flesh so damaged it barely registered as skin. Her voice came small and hollow. I'm fine, my lord. Just clumsy. I apologize for the disturbance. She tried to pull away, but Marcus's grip tightened, not restraining but preventing her from fleeing before he understood what he was seeing. His wolf had gone utterly silent, the calm that preceded explosive violence, because the scarring visible at the edges of those silver bands told stories of years of damage, not recent injury. What is on your wrist? Nothing, my lord. Old injury. Please, I must clean this mess. Her desperation to escape only confirmed the wrongness. Marcus felt Gerald and Henrik behind him, their combined tension speaking volumes about knowledge and complicity. But his entire focus narrowed to the young woman whose wrists bore metal that no shifter should wear without excruciating reason. The command came out harder than intended Alpha authority, making disobedience nearly impossible. "Show me your wrists. Now." Her hands trembled as they moved to unwrap the cloth bandages, revealing what Marcus's worst instincts had already suspected, but his conscious mind had refused to believe possible. Pure silver bands 3 inches wide, locked with intricate mechanisms that spoke to silversmith craftsmanship. The metal sat flush against skin, with no gap for air or healing, and the flesh visible at the band edges was a horror of red, black, and yellow active burning infection, scarring layered over decades of damage. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats while Marcus processed what he was seeing. Combat trauma, IED wounds, torture victims in war zones. He'd seen human suffering in forms that haunted him years later, but this was different. This was systematic. This was sanctioned. And judging by the scar tissue depth, this was years old. His voice came out dangerously quiet. "How long have you been wearing these?" "10 years, my lord." The words hit like physical impact. 10 years of pure silver burning directly against skin. 10 years of constant torture. And she was standing here in Ironwood Pack's kitchen like this was normal. Like this was acceptable, like no one had noticed or cared that a pack member was being slowly destroyed by metal that should never contact shifter flesh. "Since you were 12, she nodded, not meeting his eyes, body language screaming decades of conditioning to accept abuse as correction. Marcus's hands had clenched into fists at his sides, his wolf demanding blood and violence and immediate retribution against whoever had done this. But 20 years of military discipline and 5 years of judicial authority kept his voice level, kept his questions precise. "Who put them on you?" "The pack elders, my lord. Elder Gerald ordered it. My parents agreed it was necessary." Marcus turned slowly to face Gerald and Henrik, both of whom had gone pale beneath their carefully neutral expressions. Henrik looked genuinely shocked, but Gerald's face held something else, defensive, righteousness, mixed with the beginning calculation of someone deciding how to control narrative. "Danny," his second materialized from somewhere behind them, hand already on his sidearm, in the tactical awareness that never fully left Ranger-trained reflexes. "Sir, get Sarah and Victor, now." Marcus turned back to the young woman, gentling his voice with effort. "What is your name?" "Elena Morrison, my lord." "Elena, I need you to come with me. We're going to document this, and then we're going to fix it. Do you understand?" She looked at him with eyes that had stopped believing in rescue years ago. "My lord, there's nothing to fix. This is my correction. This is what I deserve for being born wrong." The words carried such absolute conviction that Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, the place where his younger sister's memory lived alongside guilt, that he'd been deployed overseas when she needed protection from an abusive alpha. He'd sworn after her death that no one would suffer like that under his watch, that his authority would be shield for the vulnerable rather than weapon for the powerful. He'd just found a woman who'd been tortured for a decade in plain sight while pack leadership did nothing. Marcus took Elena's hand carefully, avoiding the destroyed flesh around the silver bands. "You weren't born wrong. Someone told you that lie, and they're going to answer for it. Come with me, please." She followed because Alpha Command left little choice, but her body language screamed learned helplessness and certainty that this attention would only make things worse. Henrik and Gerald tried to follow, but Marcus stopped them with a look that promised consequences if they interfered. "You two stay here. Danny, no one enters or leaves pack house grounds without my explicit authorization. Enforce that order with whatever force necessary." Danny's grin held nothing friendly. "With pleasure, boss." Sarah and Victor arrived within minutes, both taking one look at Elena's wrists and going professionally cold in the way that meant they were compartmentalizing horror to maintain operational effectiveness. Sarah guided Elena to a private room off the medical wing with gentle efficiency, while Victor assembled documentation equipment and pulled on latex gloves with clinical precision. Marcus remained in the hallway, forcing himself to center, to breathe, to approach this systematically, rather than giving in to his wolf's demand for immediate violence. The bands would come off, he'd bend the metal with his bare hands if necessary, but first they needed evidence. First they needed to understand scope. First they needed to document everything, so when he brought charges, there would be no escape through procedural technicalities. Victor emerged after 20 minutes, face grim, tablet in hand. "You need to see this." The photos were worse than the glimpses Marcus had caught in the kitchen. Victor had photographed Elena's wrist from every angle with medical precision, measurements, close-ups of tissue damage, documentation of infection, severity. The bands sat embedded in flesh that had tried and failed to heal around them for a decade, creating channels of permanent destruction. The scarring extended several inches beyond the metal layers upon layers of burned tissue, forming ridges and valleys that mapped years of suffering. Victor's preliminary report read like a horror catalog. Third-degree burns, chronic and active. Nerve damage, extensive, likely permanent peripheral neuropathy, arthritis in both wrist joints, inflammatory response to constant irritation. Bone density decreased from systemic silver toxicity. Liver and kidney function compromised. Estimated survival time, if bands remain 3 to 5 years maximum. "She's dying." Victor's voice held the flat tone of someone delivering terminal diagnosis. "Slowly, methodically from a decade of heavy metal poisoning. The bands need to come off immediately, but removal will cause catastrophic tissue damage because flesh has essentially fused to the metal. She might not survive the removal itself." Marcus stared at the photos at evidence of systematic torture inflicted on someone who'd been 12 years old when it started. What kind of survival odds are we talking about? For removal, 70, maybe 75% if we're careful. But even if she survives, the damage is largely irreversible. The nerve damage alone means she'll never have full hand function. The arthritis will worsen with age. The bone density issues will plague her for life. And that's assuming we can prevent infection during healing, which is far from guaranteed given her compromised immune response. "And if we leave them on," Victor met his eyes. "She dies before she's 30, probably in significant pain. The toxicity is systemic now. It's not a question of if, but when." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her expression controlled, but Marcus could read the fury beneath professional composure. "Finished preliminary interview. AlphaKing, we need to talk." They moved to the secure room. Danny had established tactical gear and communications equipment already set up with military efficiency. Sarah pulled out her recorder and notepad, flipping to pages covered in precise handwriting. "Elena Morrison, age 22, born and raised in Ironwood Pack. First shift occurred at age 12 during ceremonial coming-of-age ceremony. Her wolf presented as alpha female, silver-white coat, dominant presence, size matching adult male alphas. The entire pack witnessed it." Marcus felt his wolf stir with recognition. Alpha females were rare, maybe 1 in 10,000, but they weren't unnatural. Ancient texts described them as blessed by the moon goddess, powerful leaders meant to balance male authority with complementary strength. Modern pack culture had largely erased them through systematic suppression, but Marcus had read enough history to know what Elena's emergence should have meant. "Elder Gerald declared her an abomination on the spot," Sarah continued. "Said alpha females couldn't exist, that her presentation threatened pack hierarchy and natural order. He gave her parents a choice: execution or correction through suppression." Correction. The word tasted like ash. "That's what they called the bands. Correction." Sarah nodded. Elena was held in a silver-lined cage for 3 days while the pack silversmith crafted custom suppression bands. She couldn't shift back to human form because she didn't know how, yet remained trapped as a wolf the entire time. When the bands were ready, they forced her to shift back, then locked the silver on her wrists. She was 12 years old. Marcus had interrogated war criminals with more compassion in their eyes than this story suggested. Her parents agreed to this. Her father, Thomas Morrison, claimed it was mercy, that execution was the only alternative. Her mother, Diana Morrison, said nothing but didn't object. 3 months after the bands were installed, they moved Elena to servants' quarters. She's been working kitchen detail for 10 years, living alone, essentially invisible to the pack. And no one questioned this. No one reported it. 10 years of a pack member being tortured in plain sight, and not one wolf thought to contact royal authority. Sarah's jaw tightened. According to Elena, most pack members know about the bands. Some avoid her out of superstition belief that alpha females are cursed. Others simply don't care. She's been conditioned to believe she deserves this, that the torture is justified correction for being born wrong. Victor pulled up additional data on his tablet. I accessed what medical records I could without elder authorization. Elena has been treated repeatedly for infections, complications from the band's pain management. Every healing request for band removal was denied by elder council. The attending physicians documented their objections, but ultimately complied with elder authority. Danny's voice came from his station at the communications desk, flat and angry. Boss, I pulled financial records using Royal Override. Found payment ledgers for the silversmith Silas Kane. There are 5 commissions over the past 20 years, all for what's listed as custom correction devices. Ordered by elder council and paid through PAC general funds. The number 5 hung in the air like accusation. Marcus felt pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. 5 devices, 4 dead girls in Victor's medical review, 1 surviving. Elena's the only one who lived long enough for us to find her. Sarah's professional mask cracked slightly, revealing the rage underneath. The others died from complications, silver toxicity, organ failure infection, all between ages 15 and 18, all listed as natural causes. Natural causes. The lie sat in official records, sanitized and filed, while children died from systematic torture disguised as correction. Marcus had seen corruption in his 5 years as AlphaKing had brought down alphas who abused authority and elders who enabled predators. But this was different in scope and cruelty, not opportunistic predation, but ideological elimination of children deemed wrong by traditional standards. His phone buzzed with incoming message from Danny's secured silversmith workshop. Kane is cooperative, pulled commission records. You need to see this. Marcus made it to Silas Kane's workshop in under 10 minutes, Aram and Victor following in the support vehicle. The building sat on packed grounds but separate from main facilities, traditional craftsman space filled with tools and projects in various stages of completion. Silas himself was 55, weathered hands and nervous energy, suggesting someone who'd realized he'd stepped in something far deeper than anticipated. Danny had the silversmith's ledger open on a work table, pages photographed and backed up to secure servers before original evidence was even touched. The entries were meticulous, each commission detailed with specifications, materials, completion dates, and payment confirmations. Marcus read the list while his wolf demanded blood. Sarah Winters, age 13 from, correction bands and width pure silver custom locks, status deceased, age 16 silver toxicity, Maya Chen, age 14. Correction bands with pure silver custom locks. Status deceased, age 18. Organ failure. Rebecca Stone, age 12. Correction bands with the pure silver custom locks. Status deceased, age 15. Septic infection. Julia Madsen, age 15. Correction bands commissioned refused by subject. Status executed, age 15. Elder order. Elena Morrison, age 12. Correction bands with the pure silver custom locks. Status active 5 alpha female children, 4 dead through torture or execution. 1 surviving through sheer stubborn refusal to give Gerald the satisfaction of dying. And Silas Kane had documented it all, like ordinary business transactions, professional records of systematic destruction. Silas spoke from where Danny had positioned him, hands shaking slightly. I only made what I was ordered to make, AlphaKing. The Elder Council commissioned the work, said it was within PAC law. I'm a craftsman, not I didn't question the orders. You made torture devices for children and kept records like jewelry commissions. Marcus's voice came out cold enough that Silas flinched. You documented 4 deaths and continued accepting commissions. I was following orders PAC law gives elders authority over. PAC law doesn't supersede basic morality or royal authority over child welfare. Marcus turned to Danny. Seal this workshop. Nothing gets moved, nothing gets destroyed. Silas Kane, you're under arrest for conspiracy in the torture and murder of minors. You'll be held pending tribunal. Silas opened his mouth to protest, but Danny's hand on his shoulder suggested silence was the wiser option. 2 enforcement officers Marcus had brought from Stormhaven materialized to take custody, removing the silversmith with professional efficiency that left no room for resistance. Victor was already photographing ledger pages, creating redundant documentation that would survive any attempt at evidence tampering. Sarah had moved to examine the workshop itself, looking for additional records or materials that might provide further evidence. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Henrik Stone directly. The Alpha answered on the second ring voice, carrying careful neutrality. AlphaKing Thorne, I'm at the Silversmith workshop. Found records of 5 alpha female children subjected to suppression devices over 20 years. 4 are dead. Elena Morrison is the only survivor. He let silence stretch before continuing. You're going to summon every member of your elder council to Pack House Main Hall now. And Henrik, if anyone tries to flee Ironwood territory, Danny has authorization to use whatever force necessary to detain them. Henrik's pause spoke volumes about calculations happening behind the careful Alpha facade. AlphaKing, perhaps we should discuss this privately before. I'm not discussing anything. I'm informing you of my orders. Elder Council Main Hall, 30 minutes. Comply, or I'll add obstruction charges to whatever else I find. He ended the call before Henrik could respond, then turned to his team. Sarah, I want witness statements from the families of those 4 dead girls. Track down parents, siblings, anyone who knew them. Victor, full medical, workup on Elena. Documentation of every injury, every complication, expert testimony on the effects of long-term silver exposure. Danny, evidence chain of custody on everything we've collected, and I want background checks on every elder council member going back 20 years. They moved with practiced coordination, years of working together translating into efficient execution without need for further instruction. Marcus remained in the workshop staring at Silas Kane's meticulous records of atrocity and felt the weight of failure settle on his shoulders. 5 children, 20 years, and no one had stopped it because tradition declared alpha females shouldn't exist, because pack culture prioritized order over justice, because elder authority went unchallenged, even when it turned monstrous. His phone buzzed again, this time Elena's medical data from Victor. The preliminary scans showed silver toxicity in her liver, kidneys, and bone marrow. Nerve conductivity tests revealed permanent damage to both radial and ulnar nerves. Joint inflammation consistent with severe arthritis. And beneath all the clinical terminology, the story of a 12-year-old child tortured into her 20s because she'd been born with power that threatened traditional hierarchy. Marcus had promised after his sister's death that he'd be shield for the vulnerable. Looking at Elena's medical data, at 4 dead girls' names in a silversmith's ledger, at the systematic erasure of children deemed wrong by traditional standards, he felt the promise settle into something harder than oath. Ironwood Pack had sanctioned child torture for 2 decades. Elder Gerald Blackwood had ordered it justified. It maintained it through ideological conviction that alpha females were abominations requiring correction. Henrik Stone had enabled it through inaction, through prioritizing pack stability over protecting the vulnerable. And an entire pack had funded it through general dues, complicit, through willful ignorance or active support. They were going to answer for it, every single one of them. The Elder Council arrived at Pack House Main Hall with varying degrees of concern and indignation. Gerald entered first, carrying himself with the righteous authority of someone accustomed to his word being law. 4 other elders followed, 3 males and 1 female, ages ranging from mid-50s to early 70s, all bearing the confident bearing of long-held power. Marcus stood at the hall's center with Danny at his shoulder and Sarah taking position near the entrance. Victor had remained with Elena, conducting full medical documentation while keeping her safe from any potential retaliation. Henrik hovered near the elder's alpha position, compromised by the uncertainty of what was about to unfold. Elder Gerald Blackwood stepped forward. Gerald moved with deliberate slowness, making statement through his refusal to hurry for anyone's command. AlphaKing Thorne, I understand you've been making serious accusations regarding Ironwood's governance. Perhaps you'd care to explain these charges before conducting what appears to be. Elena Morrison, age 22, has worn pure silver suppression bands locked directly against her wrists since age 12. The bands were commissioned by Elder Council, crafted by Pack silversmith Silas Kane, and installed on a child following her first shift. Do you deny ordering this? Gerald's expression shifted to defensive righteousness. I ordered correction of an abomination, yes. Alpha females violate natural order established by the moon goddess. They threaten pack hierarchy, challenge male authority, create chaos in pack structure. Elena Morrison shifted as alpha female, an impossibility that required immediate correction. You had a 12-year-old child fitted with torture devices that have been burning her constantly for 10 years. I had a dangerous anomaly corrected through approved pack protocols. The silver bands suppress her aberrant wolf, allowing her to live as she should have been born as a proper beta female. This is Mercy AlphaKing. The alternative would have been execution. Marcus let Gerald's words hang in the air, watching the other elders' reactions. Two nodded agreement with Gerald's characterization, seeing nothing wrong with his logic. One looked uncomfortable but remained silent. The female elder, Martha Green, according to files, met Marcus's eyes with something approaching defiance. Elder Green, do you agree with Gerald's assessment? Martha lifted her chin. Alpha females are unnatural AlphaKing. This has been established truth for generations. Our pack laws clearly state that such aberrations must be corrected or removed. Elder Gerald followed proper protocols. Show me these pack laws. Written documentation. Gerald's confidence wavered slightly. The laws are traditional, passed down through generations of elders. Not everything requires written codification when truth is universally understood. So no written law, just your interpretation of what constitutes aberration. Marcus pulled out his tablet, displaying the medical photos Victor had taken. This is what your correction looks like. Third-degree burns, chronic and active, covering both wrists. Permanent nerve damage. Arthritis severe enough to cripple hand function. Systemic silver poisoning affecting liver, kidneys, and bone marrow. Expected survival time if the bands remain 3 to 5 years. Elena Morrison will likely die before she's 30 because you decided at age 12 that she was born wrong. He swiped to the next image, close-up of the silver bands embedded in destroyed flesh. The metal has essentially fused with tissue after a decade of constant contact. Removing these bands will cause catastrophic damage. She might not survive the removal process itself. And even if she does, she'll carry permanent disability for the rest of her life. This is what you call mercy. The uncomfortable elder Robert Marsh spoke up hesitantly. AlphaKing, none of us enjoy the necessity of correction, but alpha females pose genuine threat to pack stability. Without clear hierarchy, without male authority, maintaining order, packs descend into chaos. The moon goddess designed males as alphas for a reason. Females who present with alpha traits are mistakes that must be addressed. Where in moon goddess scripture does it say alpha females are forbidden? Silence. Gerald tried to respond, but Marcus cut him off. No interpretation, no traditional understanding. Direct scripture. Show me where the moon goddess explicitly states that alpha females shouldn't exist. Gerald's jaw tightened. The scripture is clear that males lead and females follow, that alphas command and omegas submit. The natural order doesn't include burning children with silver for a decade. Natural order had Elena Morrison born as alpha female. You suppressed nature, Gerald. You perverted it into torture and called it correction. Marcus pulled up the silversmith's ledger on the display screen, making sure every elder could see the entries. Sarah Winters, Maya Chen, Rebecca Stone, Julia Madsen, Elena Morrison. 5 alpha female children in 20 years. 4 dead from your correction methods. 1 surviving but dying slowly. Julia Madsen refused the bands and was executed at age 15 on elder council order. Do you deny this? Gerald didn't flinch. I ordered correction or execution, yes. In each case, the family was given choice. Most accepted correction as the more merciful option. Julia Madsen's parents chose execution rather than allowing their daughter to live corrected. That was their decision. On the casual admission, the complete lack of recognition that he'd ordered children tortured and killed struck Marcus like physical impact. Gerald genuinely believed he'd done right, that his actions had protected the pack, that tradition justified systematic elimination of children who presented differently than expected. You killed 4 children, tortured a 5th for a decade, and you see nothing wrong with this because tradition told you they were abominations. I protected my pack from chaos. I maintained order. I fulfilled my duty as elder. Gerald's voice rose with conviction. AlphaKing, you may have reformed many pack traditions across your territories, but you cannot legislate away biological reality. Alpha females are mistakes. Nature itself rejects them. The fact that most die young from the correction process simply proves they weren't meant to survive. Marcus had prosecuted sociopaths with more self-awareness than Gerald showed in that moment. The elder truly believed every word his ideology so absolute that 4 dead children registered as unfortunate necessity rather than atrocity. There would be no reaching him through appeals to morality or compassion Gerald had buried both under decades of righteous certainty. But Marcus wasn't here to reform Gerald. He was here to remove him. Elder Gerald Blackwood, you are under arrest for ordering the torture and murder of 5 minors. The charges include child abuse, negligent homicide, corruption of PAC authority, and systematic violation of royal protection laws. He turned to Danny. Take him into custody. House arrest pending tribunal tomorrow. Danny moved forward, but Gerald's voice stopped him. You cannot do this. I followed PAC law. I acted within elder authority. You have no jurisdiction over internal PAC discipline. Royal authority supersedes PAC law in cases of child welfare. That's been established precedent since I took authority 5 years ago. Marcus stepped closer to Gerald, letting his alpha presence expand. You tortured children, Gerald. You documented it, maintained it, justified it through ideology that prioritizes your comfort over their lives. That ends now, today. You will answer for every moment of suffering you inflicted. Gerald's face flushed with rage. She was an abomination. They all were alpha females, threaten everything we've built. They undermine hierarchy, challenge male leadership, corrupt the stability that keeps PACs functional. I did what was necessary to protect Ironwood from chaos. You protected nothing. You murdered 4 children and tortured a 5th because they threatened your authority, because their existence challenged your worldview, because you couldn't handle the reality that the moon goddess creates alpha females for purposes you're too small-minded to understand. Marcus turned to the other elders. Anyone who voted in favor of the correction orders shares culpability. Step forward now, and I might show leniency. Wait for investigation to uncover your involvement, and I'll prosecute to the full extent. Martha Green stepped forward after a moment of hesitation. I voted in favor of correction for all 5 cases. Elder Gerald convinced the council that alpha females posed existential threat. We believed we were protecting the PAC. 2 other elders, Robert Marsh and David Chen, admitted their votes as well. Only the 5th elder, a male named Thomas Sterling, remained silent with expression, suggesting he'd abstained or opposed the measures, but lacked courage to speak against council majority. All 3 of you, house arrest pending tribunal. Henrik. The alpha approached warily, knowing his position had become precarious. AlphaKing. You've been alpha of Ironwood for 15 years. Gerald has been lid elder for 20. You allowed systematic child torture to occur under your leadership. You prioritize PAC stability over protecting the vulnerable. You failed the most fundamental duty of PAC Alpha. Explain why I shouldn't remove you from authority immediately. Henrik's face went pale. AlphaKing, I didn't know the full extent of the elders handled discipline matters, and I trusted their judgment on traditional protocols. I never directly witnessed the suffering or understood the severity. You're the alpha. Ultimate authority rests with you regardless of how much power you delegate to elders. 4 children died on your watch, Henrik. 5 were tortured, and you claim ignorance as defense. Marcus let disgust color his voice. You're removed as alpha of Ironwood PAC effective immediately. Pending tribunal results, you may face additional charges for negligent endangerment. Henrik started to protest, but Danny's hand on his shoulder suggested silence. The former alpha was escorted to join the elders under house arrest, leaving PAC leadership vacuum that Marcus would need to address. But first came justice for the children Gerald had destroyed in tradition's name. Sarah appeared at the hall entrance, tablet in hand. AlphaKing and have preliminary statements from 3 of the victim families. They're willing to testify at tribunal. Good, schedule them for tomorrow morning. I want this tribunal public, every member of Ironwood PAC in attendance. They funded this torture through their PAC dues. They enabled it through silence. They're going to see exactly what their compliance purchased. He turned to address the assembled PAC members who'd gathered during the confrontation. Dozens of wolves filled the hall, now word having spread about the Royal Inspection's discoveries. Fear and uncertainty painted most faces, though a few showed what might have been relief that authority had finally intervened. Tomorrow at dawn, this pack will hold public tribunal regarding systematic torture and murder of alpha female children. Every member will attend. You will hear testimony from victim families. You will see medical evidence of what your elder council ordered, and you will decide whether you stand with tradition or with justice. Because Ironwood Pack doesn't get to continue as it has. That ends today. The Pack House erupted in murmurs, shock, denial, defensive justification from older members, anger and validation from younger wolves who'd perhaps questioned but lacked power to challenge. Marcus let them process watching pack dynamics shift as authority structures collapsed. His phone buzzed with message from Victor: ban removal, decision needed. Elena's condition deteriorating, infection spreading. Windows closing for safe removal. Marcus excused himself and headed to the medical wing where Victor had set up examination area. Elena sat on the medical table, wrists freshly bandaged, looking smaller and more fragile than when he'd first seen her in the kitchen. Sarah stood nearby, having completed preliminary interview before being called to track down victim families. Elena, Dr. Kane says the bands need to come off soon. The infection is spreading and your body can't fight it while the silver continues poisoning your system. She looked at her wrists with the flat acceptance of someone who'd stopped hoping for relief years ago. They're locked, my lord. Only Silas Kane has the keys, and the locks are designed to resist tampering. Even if you had keys, the bands have been on so long that removal it would hurt. How badly? Marcus asked Victor directly. The medical examiner didn't sugarcoat his assessment. Flesh has fused to metal after a decade of constant contact. Removing the bands means tearing away layers of tissue. There will be significant bleeding. She'll likely go into shock from pain. Blood loss might require transfusion, and that's assuming we successfully remove both bands without complications. Success rate for surviving the procedure itself is about 70 to 75%. And if we leave them on, she dies within 5 years, probably sooner as the infection spreads. The silver toxicity is systemic. It's not a question of if it kills her, but when. Marcus met Elena's eyes, seeing resignation and fear warring in their depths. This is your choice, Elena. I can break the locks. My strength as Alpha King exceeds normal wolf capabilities. But Victor's right that removal will cause severe pain. Or we can attempt to locate the keys, though that delays treatment while infection worsens. Or we can try to manage your condition with the bands in place, though that only postpones the inevitable. What do you want? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her wrists as if seeing them clearly for first time in years. Finally, the voice barely above whisper. I've worn these bands for 10 years, my lord. Every morning I wake to the smell of my own flesh burning. Every night I pray I won't wake up. If removing them means one day of worse pain, but then freedom, I'll take that trade. Even knowing you might not survive the removal itself. I'm already dying. At least this way I'd die trying to be free. She looked up at him. You're certain you can break the locks, that the bands will come off? I'm certain. The metal will bend under my strength. The question isn't whether I can remove them, it's whether you can survive the removal. Elena nodded slowly. Then do it, please. I can't wear them another day. I can't spend what's left of my life in this torture. Even if I die, at least I'll die free. Victor prepared medical equipment while Sarah positioned herself to provide comfort and support. Marcus stood before Elena, gently taking her left wrist in his hands, careful to avoid jarring the destroyed flesh. The silver band was cool under his fingers, innocuous-looking metal that concealed a decade of systematic torture. Elena, I'm going to work the lock first. This might hurt as I manipulate the mechanism. She nodded, bracing herself. Marcus examined the lock with careful attention. Silas Kane had crafted it with genuine skill, precision work that would resist normal tampering. But he wasn't interested in picking locks. He was interested in breaking them. He pulled. The lock mechanism resisted metal straining against force that exceeded its design specifications. Marcus felt the silver beginning to deform lock components, grinding against each other as he applied steady pressure. Elena gasped, the movement of the band against fused tissue, sending fresh agony through damaged nerves. But Marcus didn't stop. Couldn't stop now that he'd committed to this course. The lock broke. Metal components shattered with sharp crack, lock mechanism falling away as the band loosened. But loosened didn't mean removed. Marcus had to carefully pry the silver away from Elena's wrist, and that meant tearing skin that had essentially fused to the metal over thousands of days of constant contact. Elena's scream cut through the medical wing raw and primal, the sound of someone experiencing pain beyond normal human tolerance. Her free hand gripped Sarah's arm hard enough to bruise body convulsing as Marcus worked the band away from her wrist. Skin tore. Blood flowed. Layers of scar tissue that had held the metal in place gave way reluctantly, and when the band finally came free, it brought chunks of flesh with it. The wrist underneath was horror Marcus would carry in his nightmares, burned tissue exposed, bleeding freely, damaged, beyond what seemed survivable. Victor moved immediately with sterile gauze and antiseptic working to control bleeding, while Elena sobbed through shock. Marcus held the silver band in his hand's innocuous circle of metal, still warm from body heat, and felt rage settle into cold determination. This was what Gerald had ordered installed on a 12-year-old child. This was what tradition had justified. This was what an entire pack had funded through their silence. The other one. Elena's voice came weak through tears. Please, I can't have one on and one off. I can't. Victor started to object, but Marcus was already moving to her right wrist. She's right. Finish it. The second removal was equally brutal. More screaming, more blood, more flesh, tearing away from metal that had no business touching shifter skin. When both bands finally lay on the medical tray, Elena collapsed forward into Sarah's arms, conscious but devastated, freed from decade-long torture, but bearing scars that would mark her for life. Victor worked with efficient precision cleaning wounds, applying bandages, starting IV fluids to combat shock. Blood pressure is dropping, setting up transfusion protocol. Sarah, keep her talking. She needs to stay conscious. Marcus stood with both silver bands in his hands, metal slick with Elena's blood, and made silent vow that no child would ever wear such devices again. Not in Ironwood, not in any pack under his authority. Gerald's ideology had created these torture instruments. Marcus's authority would ensure they never touched another child. Elena's voice came weak from the medical table. My lord, my wolf, I can feel it. Buried deep, but it's there, it's clawing toward the surface. Give it time, Victor said while setting up the transfusion. You've been suppressed for 10 years. Your body needs to remember how to access your wolf. Don't force it. But Marcus could feel it too, the stirring of alpha presence that had been caged for a decade finally sensing freedom. Elena's wolf was wounded, traumatized, but very much alive. The suppression hadn't destroyed it. Gerald had failed in that at least. The wolf had survived to claw its way back. Danny appeared in the medical wing doorway. Boss Gerald's asking to speak with you. Says he can explain the necessity of the corrections if you'll listen to his full justification. Marcus set the blood-stained bands down carefully. Tell Gerald he'll have opportunity to justify his actions at tribunal tomorrow. Right now, I'm not interested in his explanations. There's more. Henrik provided access to Elder Council meeting, minutes going back 20 years. Documents show that the correction protocols weren't just Gerald's initiative. They've been elder policy for over 50 years across multiple council iterations. This is institutional, not individual. The weight of that information settled over Marcus like physical burden. 50 years of systematic elimination of alpha females. How many girls had died before Gerald's tenure? How many families had lost children to ideology, masquerading as tradition? The scope threatened to overwhelm, but Marcus forced himself to focus on immediate concerns. Deal with Ironwood first. Expand investigation to historical cases after justice was served for the 5 most recent victims. Sarah finished helping Victor stabilize Elena, then joined Marcus in the hallway. Her expression carried the controlled fury of someone who'd spent years investigating child abuse and never quite developed calluses against the horror. I interviewed Sarah Winter's parents, Robert and Michelle Winters, late 60s. Their daughter died 12 years ago at age 16. They knew about the bans, watched Sarah suffer for 3 years before silver toxicity killed her. They begged Gerald to remove the bans multiple times. He refused. Did they report to royal authority? They didn't know they could. Ironwood pack culture emphasizes elder authority over external intervention. Most pack members still believe that royal inspections only address major violations, not internal discipline matters. Sarah's voice tightened with anger. Gerald controlled the narrative completely. He convinced the pack that alpha females posed existential threat, that correction was necessary mercy, and isolated families with no external support structure complied rather than face pack-wide ostracism. What about the other victim families? Maya Chen's brother Kevin is willing to testify. Parents are deceased. Kevin believes the stress of losing Maya killed them within 2 years of her death. Rebecca Stone's mother Linda is alive but barely functional. Losing her daughter destroyed her mentally. Father left the pack afterward, whereabouts unknown. Julia Madsen's parents Carl and Helen are still in Ironwood. They chose execution over correction for their daughter, and they've lived with that choice for 15 years. They're eager to testify. Marcus felt the weight of it. Families destroyed, children eliminated, an entire system of abuse enabled through cultural isolation and elder authority. Make sure all of them are protected. If Gerald has support among traditional pack members, there might be retaliation attempts against witnesses. Already arranged security. Danny's positioned enforcement around each family. Sarah paused. AlphaKing, there's something else. Elena mentioned siblings. Apparently Thomas and Diana Morrison have other children, 2 younger daughters, who were sent to live with relatives in different packs after Elena's correction. They removed their other children from Ironwood to protect them from association with Elena. The additional layer of betrayal, parents who'd moved their acceptable children away rather than fight for the daughter they'd allowed to be tortured, struck Marcus as particularly cruel. Track down the siblings. They might not be willing to testify against their parents, but we need to document the full scope of Morrison family dynamics. Victor emerged from the medical wing, pulling off surgical gloves. Elena's stable. Blood pressure normalizing, transfusion successful. She's sleeping now, sedated to manage pain and give her body time to begin healing. But Marcus, we need to talk about her wolf. They moved to the secure conference room Danny had established. Victor pulled up medical scans on his laptop displaying data that meant little to Marcus without interpretation. The silver suppression didn't just cage Elena's wolf, it created neurological blocks in the pathways that allow shifter transformation. Think of it like muscle memory that's been forcibly suppressed for 10 years. Even with the bands removed, her body might not remember how to shift. Might not or won't. Unknown. Some suppression victims recover full shifting capability once the silver is removed. Others remain partially or fully blocked. The neural pathways have atrophied from disuse. Elena's been suppressed since her first shift at age 12. She shifted once, was immediately caged, then forcibly shifted back to human before the bands were installed. She has almost no experience actually being her wolf. Marcus considered implications. If she can't shift, Gerald's defense becomes stronger. He'll argue the suppression was necessary, that alpha females are too dangerous to exist fully empowered. Exactly, which is why we need Elena to attempt shifting before tribunal. Prove that she can access her wolf, that the suppression was torture rather than necessary correction. Victor closed his laptop. But we can't force it. Attempting to shift before her body is ready could cause additional trauma. It's a risk either way. Let her decide, Marcus said finally. She's made it this far through choice and resilience. We give her the information and let her determine when she's ready. Danny called from communication station. Boss getting reports from other packs in the territory. News about the Ironwood investigation is spreading. I'm fielding questions about whether this affects other packs' elder authority, whether alpha female suppression is now illegal, whether historical cases will be investigated. Tell them tribunal results tomorrow will establish precedent. Any pack currently engaging in alpha female suppression needs to immediately cease and report to role enforcement for oversight of ban removal. Historical cases will be reviewed, but current active suppression is priority. The implications were expanding faster than Marcus had anticipated. Ironwood's systematic torture wasn't isolated elder authority, and traditional pack culture existed across his entire territory. How many other packs had suppressed or eliminated alpha females? How many children were currently suffering under similar correction protocols? The investigation couldn't stop with Gerald. It had to expand to examine institutional practices across every pack under royal authority. But first Ironwood. First justice for Elena Morrison and 4 dead girls whose names deserve to be remembered. First public tribunal that would force pack members to confront what their silence had enabled. Sarah rejoined the planning session with updated witness list. 5 testimonies confirmed for tomorrow. Robert and Michelle Winters, Kevin Chen, Lindo Stone Carl, and Helen Madsen. Victor will present medical evidence. Elena said she wants to testify personally, show the pack what correction means. She's strong enough for that. Physically questionable. Mentally, she's determined. 22 years old, tortured for 10 of them, and she wants to speak. I think we let her. Marcus nodded agreement. Elena's testimony would carry weight that clinical evidence couldn't match survivors speaking truth to power-forcing pack members to see the human cost of their ideological compliance. The evening progressed with continued evidence gathering and witness preparation. Marcus reviewed Elder Council meeting minutes finding documentation of correction protocols dating back 50 years. Every alpha female who'd emerged in Ironwood during that span had been corrected or executed. Some records showed family consent, others indicated forced compliance through threat of pack-wide punishment. The systematic nature of it, the bureaucratic documentation of child torture, made it somehow worse than opportunistic abuse. Near midnight, Marcus found himself standing in Ironwood's ceremonial grounds, where first shifts traditionally occurred. The space was peaceful under moonlight, innocent of the horrors it had witnessed. Elena had stood here at 12 years old experiencing her first transformation, only to have celebration turn to condemnation in moments. How many other children had shifted here only to face correction or execution? How many families had watched their daughters be destroyed by tradition? His phone buzzed Danny reporting that Gerald had requested legal representation and was preparing defense arguments for tribunal. The elder remained convinced his actions were justified, that royal authority overstepping pack tradition would cause more harm than good. Marcus almost admired the certainty, the absolute conviction that ideology trumps suffering. It would make tomorrow's tribunal easier. In some ways, no remorse meant no need for mercy. Victor sent update on Elena's condition, sleeping peacefully, vital signs stable, no signs of infection recurrence. The wolf inside her was stirring more actively now, instincts awakening as silver suppression faded. Tomorrow or the next day, she might be ready to attempt first shift in a decade. The transformation would be painful, possibly damaging, but necessary to prove that Gerald's correction had failed to destroy what the moon goddess had created. Marcus returned to his temporary quarters near dawn, having slept perhaps 3 hours total. The tribunal would begin in 4 hours. Ironwood Pack would assemble to hear evidence of systematic child torture. Gerald would defend his actions through appeals to tradition and natural order. And Marcus would ensure that justice, however inadequate for the dead, at least served the living and future children who might otherwise face similar correction. Danny was already awake, coffee brewing, tactical gear laid out for the day ahead. Morning, boss. Tribunal setup is complete. Every pack member confirmed attendance. Gerald still maintaining he did nothing wrong. Henrik's a mess, former Alpha realizing his inaction destroyed children. The victim families are ready to testify. And Elena, Victor says she's awake, stable, determined to speak. She wants to show the pack her wrists during testimony, let them see what correction looks like after 10 years. Marcus poured coffee and stared out at Ironwood territory waking under autumn dawn. Somewhere in the pack house, Gerald was preparing ideological defense. Somewhere else, Elena was gathering courage to confront pack that had enabled her torture. And across the ceremonial grounds where she'd first shifted the moon goddess, watched in whatever form divine observation took. Tomorrow's tribunal would establish precedent affecting every pack in Marcus's territory. It would challenge cultural norms that had existed for generations. It would force pack members to choose between comfortable tradition and uncomfortable justice. But today, it would simply give voice to 4 dead girls and 1 survivor who'd refused to die quietly. The tribunal began at dawn with every member of Ironwood Pack crowded into the Great Hall, standing room only for those who arrived late. Marcus had ordered mandatory attendance, and the enforcement team verified each wolf against Pack registry to ensure complete participation. 800 wolves filled a space designed for half that number, tension thick enough that his wolf registered constant low-level threat assessment. Gerald sat in the defendants section with 3 other elders who'd voted for correction protocols, all maintaining expressions of righteous certainty despite the evidence Danny had arranged on display boards behind the judicial bench. Photographs of Elena's wrist before and after band removal hung in large to ensure every pack member could see tissue damage that medical terminology couldn't adequately convey. The silversmith's ledger pages, blown up to poster size, listed 5 names with clinical precision that somehow made the horror worse. Henrik Stone occupied a separate section reserved for complicit leadership, no longer alpha, but not yet formally sentenced. His face carried the haunted look of someone realizing too late that inaction had consequences measured in children's lives. Marcus had seen that expression before, commanding officers who'd missed warning signs, before soldiers under their care committed suicide, parents who'd ignored abuse until it turned fatal. Guilt arrived too late to matter for the dead, but destroyed the living anyway. Sarah positioned the witness families in protected seating near the front, enforcement officers flanking them in case traditionalist pack members decided testimony constituted betrayal. Robert and Michelle Winters sat with clasped hands, elderly couple who'd lost their daughter 12 years ago and lived with that loss every day since. Kevin Chen stared at Gerald with barely controlled rage, the kind that came from watching a sibling die slowly while authority figures did nothing. Linda Stone looked fragile enough to shatter, still broken from losing her daughter a decade past. Carl and Helen Madsen held themselves with grim determination, parents who'd chosen execution over torture for their child and spent 15 years wondering if they'd made the right call. Victor stood near the evidence display with his medical tablet, prepared to present clinical analysis of what silver suppression did to shifter physiology over extended periods. Danny maintained position at the hall entrance, controlling access and monitoring pack dynamics for signs of violence. The enforcement team he'd brought from Stormhaven was positioned throughout the hall with clear rules of engagement: protect witnesses, document everything, prevent Gerald's supporters from disrupting proceedings. Marcus took his position at the judicial bench, letting his alpha presence expand to fill the hall and establish authority beyond question. The tribunal operated under royal jurisdiction, which meant pack law took secondary position to territorial regulations he'd established specifically to protect vulnerable members from elder abuse. Gerald would try to argue traditional authority, but that argument died the moment systematic child torture entered evidence. He opened proceedings with voice pitched to carry to the hall's furthest corners. This tribunal examines whether 5 alpha female children were systematically tortured and killed under sanctioned Ironwood Pack policy between the years 2005 and 2025. The charges include child abuse, negligent homicide, corruption of pack authority, and violation of royal protection statutes. Every pack member present funded these activities through general dues. You will hear testimony from victim families. You will see medical evidence. And you will decide whether tradition justifies what was done in its name. The hall erupted in murmurs, shock from younger wolves who'd perhaps known alpha females existed, but not the specifics of correction protocols. Defensive justification from older generation raised to believe suppression was necessary. Uncertainty from those caught between tradition and growing horror at what evidence suggested. Marcus let the noise build for 30 seconds before releasing enough alpha dominance to silence them. First witness, Robert Winters, father of Sarah Winters, who died at age 16 from silver toxicity. Robert stood with Michelle's support, moving to the witness stand with the careful steps of someone who'd aged beyond his years through grief. He was 71 according to files, but looked older, face-lined with a particular exhaustion that came from losing a child. When he spoke, his voice carried flat affect of someone who'd told this story so many times internally that emotion had worn away, leaving only factual horror. Sarah was 13 when she shifted. First shift ceremony, whole pack watching like it's supposed to be celebration. She transformed and her wolf was beautiful. Silver gray coat, strong build, alpha presence that made even all adult wolves step back. I was proud. My daughter was powerful, blessed by the moon goddess with rare gift. He paused, collecting himself. Elder Gerald stood up and called her an abomination. Said alpha females couldn't exist, that Sarah's wolf was corruption of natural order. He gave us choice execution or correction through silver bands. We chose correction because we thought it meant she'd live. We didn't understand what correction meant. Michelle sobbed quietly in her seat. Robert continued without looking at her, staring at some point above the assembled pack. They fitted the bands 2 days later. Sarah screamed when the silver touched her skin, screamed until her voice gave out, then just made these awful whimpering sounds. The burns never healed. Every day for 3 years, she woke up in pain and went to sleep in the pain. She stopped painting, stopped seeing friends, stopped being Sarah, just existed in this constant suffering we'd agreed to. Gerald started to speak, but Marcus cut him off with gesture. You'll have opportunity for defense. Right now, you listen. Robert's voice strengthened, slightly anger cutting through grief. Year 2, Sarah got infected. Fever so high she was delirious. We begged Elder Gerald to remove the bands so she could heal. He said no said infection was a test of whether she deserved to live. She survived, but the infection damaged her internally. Her kidneys started failing. Year 3, she was dying and everyone knew it. The pack healer told us the silver toxicity was systemic, that Sarah needed the bands off immediately or she'd be dead within months. We went to Elder Gerald again. He said if Sarah died, it proved she was never meant to exist as alpha female, that her death would be natural order asserting itself. The hall had gone completely silent. Robert turned to look directly at Gerald for the first time. Sarah died in her bed at 16 years old. Silver toxicity, organ failure, suffering, we'd agreed to because you told us it was mercy. My daughter was 13 when you destroyed her. We buried her 3 years later. And you call that correction. Michelle stood, then finding voice despite tears. We have another daughter, younger born, 5 years after Sarah. When she shifted at 12, we held our breath terrified. She'd be alpha female too. She presented as Omega. We were relieved, grateful that we wouldn't have to watch another child die slowly. That's what you did to us, Gerald. You made us grateful our daughter was born weak rather than strong. Marcus let their testimony settle over the hall before calling the next witness. Kevin Chen, brother of Maya Chen, who died at age 18. Kevin moved to the stand with barely contained fury, jaw clenched so tight Marcus could see muscle jumping. 35 years old, beta presentation, built like someone who'd channeled grief into physical conditioning. When he spoke, his voice vibrated with rage that hadn't diminished in the 12 years since Maya's death. Maya was my baby sister. 4 years younger, toughest person I ever knew. She played soccer, ran track, wanted to be a doctor. At 14, she shifted during first ceremony and presented as alpha female. I watched Elder Gerald's face go from approval to disgust in seconds. He declared her an abomination before Maya even understood what was happening. Kevin's hands gripped the witness stand hard enough that wood creaked. My parents chose correction because Gerald said the alternative was immediate execution. They thought they were saving Maya's life. Instead, they sentenced her to 4 years of torture. I watched my sister go from athlete to skeleton. The silver bands burned constantly. Her hands stopped working, right nerve damage. She couldn't play soccer anymore, couldn't run, could barely hold a fork to eat. Year 3, Maya developed arthritis in both wrists. She was 17 years old with arthritis so severe she needed help getting dressed. The pack healer said the joint damage was permanent, that she'd be crippled for life even if the bands came off. Gerald refused removal, said the suffering was necessary to suppress her wolf completely. Kevin's voice broke slightly. Year 4, Maya stopped eating, just gave up. The silver poisoning had destroyed her appetite, damaged her digestive system, made food taste like ash. She weighed 93 pounds when she died at 18. Organ failure. Her body just shut down from accumulated toxicity. And I had to watch it happen over 4 years, knowing that every day she suffered was because Elder Gerald decided powerful women were mistakes that needed correction. He turned to face Gerald directly. You killed my sister. You killed my parents too. They died within 2 years of losing Maya, broken by guilt and grief. 3 graves because you couldn't handle the idea that females could be alphas. I hope whatever they do to you at this tribunal makes you feel 1 fraction of what Maya suffered. Marcus nodded to enforcement officers who helped Kevin from the stand before rage overcame discipline. The testimony was devastatingly effective, not clinical medical reports, but human cost translated through grieving families. The PAC members watching couldn't dismiss this as abstract policy debate. These were their neighbors, PAC mates who'd lost children to elder ideology. Linda Stone took the witness stand next, so fragile that Sarah had to help her navigate the steps. Rebecca's mother looked decades older than her, 59 years, face ravaged by grief that had never healed. Her voice came barely above whisper, forcing the hall to go completely silent to hear her testimony. Rebecca was 12, my baby. She loved horses, painting sunshine. Her shift presented alpha female, and Elder Gerald declared her an abomination within minutes. My husband Henrik's brother, Alpha Henrik Stone, held Rebecca down while they locked the bands on. His own niece, he chose pack stability over family. She looked toward Henrik, who couldn't meet her eyes. The bands burned her for 3 years. Rebecca stopped painting because her hands hurt too much. Stopped riding horses because she couldn't grip the reins. Just existed in this constant agony while her uncle pretended not to notice. Year 3, she got infected. The burns were so deep that bacteria got into her bloodstream. Sepsis took her in 3 days. She was 15 years old. Linda's voice strengthened with bitterness. After Rebecca died, my husband left. Couldn't stay in the pack that killed our daughter. Couldn't look at his brother, who'd participated. I stayed because I was too broken to leave, too destroyed to function anywhere else. For 10 years, I've lived in the pack that murdered my child. And not one person ever apologized. Not Gerald, not Henrik, no one. The accusation hung in the air. Henrik Stone looked physically ill, guilt written across his features in ways that suggested Linda's testimony had shattered whatever justifications he'd maintained internally. But guilt didn't resurrect Rebecca. It just poisoned the living while the dead stayed dead. Carl and Helen Madsen approached the witness stand together, holding hands like lifeline. They were both 63, bearing the weight of a choice made 15 years ago that still haunted them. Carl spoke first, voice steady despite visible emotion. Julia was 15 when she shifted. Alpha female, powerful, absolutely certain of herself. Elder Gerald gave us the choice correction through silver bands or immediate execution. We asked Julia what she wanted. She said she'd rather die free than live in torture. Helen picked up the narrative. We tried to convince her, told her the bands might not be that bad, that she could endure it, that living was better than dying. Julia looked at us and said she'd watched Sarah Winters suffer for 3 years before dying anyway. Said if death was inevitable, she'd rather face it with dignity than beg for mercy while metal burned her wrists. Carl's voice roughened. We chose execution because our 15-year-old daughter was braver than we were. Elder Gerald ordered it carried out publicly, said it was lesson about obedience, about what happened when alpha females refused correction. They made us watch, made the whole pack watch as enforcement officers killed our child. Julia died with her head held high, never begged, never apologized for being born alpha female, just stood there and faced execution like warrior. Helen was crying now, but her voice remained strong. We lived with that choice every day. Wonder if we should have forced the bands on her, given her chance to survive even in torture. But Marcus, she was right. We saw Elena Morrison yesterday, alive but destroyed. Julia died free rather than living like that. The testimony broke something in the hall's atmosphere. Parents making impossible choices between torture and execution. Children dying either way. And through it all, Gerald's ideology turning tragedy into policy, suffering into correction. Marcus called Victor to present medical evidence. The doctor approached with his tablet and display boards. Methodical expertise providing clinical framework for what witness testimony had shown emotionally. He pulled up Elena's medical scans, comparing them to baseline shifter physiology. Standard shifter healing can address most injuries within hours to days, depending on severity. Silver disrupts this healing by introducing toxicity that prevents cellular regeneration. Short-term exposure causes burns that heal slowly. Long-term exposure creates permanent damage. Elena Morrison wore pure silver bands for 10 years, 3,650 days of constant burning. Victor displayed close-up photographs of Elena's wrists taken yesterday. Third-degree burns covering approximately 40 square centimeters per remote wrist. The tissue has burned away and attempted to heal and burned again in continuous cycle for a decade. Scar tissue is now so thick that she has almost no sensation below her wrists. The nerve damage is permanent. Even with the bands removed, Elena will never regain full hand function. He pulled up toxicology reports. Silver poisoning affects multiple organ systems. Elena's liver shows significant damage, reduced function by approximately 30%. Her kidneys are compromised. Bone density has decreased to levels typically seen in elderly wolves with osteoporosis. She's 22 years old and her skeletal structure resembles someone in their 70s. Based on progression of toxicity, Elena had 3 to 5 years left if the bands remained. The removal process itself carried 70 to 75% survival odds because flesh had fused to the metal. She survived, but she'll carry permanent disability for life. This is what correction means in medical terms: systematic destruction of a young body that should have decades of health ahead. Victor turned to address the pack directly. 4 other girls underwent similar correction. Sarah Winters died from organ failure after 3 years. Maya Chen died from accumulated toxicity after 4 years. Rebecca Stone died from septic infection after 3 years. These aren't natural deaths. These are murders committed through torture disguised as medical intervention. Gerald stood then, unable to contain himself longer. These were unfortunate complications of necessary corrections. Alpha females pose existential threat to pack stability. The moon goddess designed males as alphas for reason. Females who present with alpha traits are biological errors that must be addressed. Marcus's command cut through Gerald's justification. Sit down. Your defense comes after all evidence is presented. But Gerald remained standing, conviction overriding judicial protocol. You're putting tradition on trial, AlphaKing. Thousands of years of pack culture, of understanding natural order, of maintaining hierarchy that keeps our society functional. Yes, some girls died during correction. That's tragic, but how many packs descended into chaos because alpha females undermined male authority? How many territories collapsed because leadership was corrupted by unnatural power distribution? Name one. Marcus's voice carried deadly calm. Name one pack that collapsed because an alpha female existed. Gerald faltered. The historical records. Name one. Pacific pack, specific timeline, documented evidence that alpha female presence caused societal collapse. Silence. Gerald's jaw worked, but no words emerged. The ideological foundation of his position that alpha females cause chaos rested on assumption rather than evidence. Tradition said they were dangerous, so tradition mandated their elimination. Circular logic that required no proof beyond its own assertion. Marcus pressed the advantage. You can't name one because they don't exist. Alpha females are rare, roughly 1 in 10,000 births, but they're not new. They've existed throughout shifter history. Ancient texts describe them as blessed by the moon goddess, powerful leaders who balanced male authority with complementary strength. Modern pack culture erased them through systematic elimination, then pointed to their absence as proof they shouldn't exist. He pulled up historical documentation Danny had researched overnight. 300 years ago, multiple packs had alpha female leaders documented in territorial records. They functioned successfully for generations until cultural shift toward rigid gender hierarchy. Then alpha females started disappearing from documentation. Not because they stopped being born, but because they were killed or suppressed before reaching adulthood. You didn't correct abominations, Gerald. You murdered children who threatened your worldview. You eliminated powerful females because their existence challenged your authority. And you wrapped that elimination in tradition and called it necessary. The pack members absorbed this visible conflict between generations: older wolves raised in Gerald's ideology versus younger generation increasingly uncomfortable with what that ideology had cost. Marcus saw the shift happening in real-time: cultural certainty cracking under weight of dead children and manipulated history. Final witness, Elena Morrison. The hall went completely silent. Elena entered from the medical wing with Victor supporting her, both wrists bandaged but visible beneath short sleeves she'd specifically chosen. She looked fragile in ways that went beyond physical injury, decades of conditioning to believe she deserved torture, warring with growing recognition that maybe she'd been victim rather than abomination. She took the witness stand with careful movements, settling into the chair like someone navigating constant pain. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried in the silence. My name is Elena Morrison. I'm 22 years old. I wore silver suppression bands for 10 years from age 12 to yesterday when AlphaKing Marcus removed them. She unwrapped the bandages, slowly exposing devastated wrists to the assembled pack. Gasps rippled through the hall. Even those who'd known about the bands hadn't seen the actual damage up close. The burns, the scarring, the permanent destruction of tissue that should have been young and healthy. Year 1, I cried myself to sleep every night. The burning never stopped, never lessened. Just constant pain that I learned to function through because I had no choice. Year 2, I got infected. Fever so high, I was delirious. Pack healer told Elder Gerald the bands needed to come off or I'd die. He said to let me die, said if I couldn't survive correction, I wasn't meant to exist as alpha female. Year 3, my hands started going numb. Nerve damage from constant silver exposure. I dropped things, cut myself while cooking because I couldn't feel the knife properly. The pack healer documented it, but nothing changed. Year 4, my wolf was essentially dead. I couldn't access her anymore, couldn't shift no matter how I tried. The suppression was complete. I was 12 when they told me I was an abomination. By 16, I believed them. Year 5, I tried to remove the bands myself. Used a kitchen knife, worked for hours until my hands were covered in blood. The locks wouldn't budge. I finally gave up and cried until dawn. Year 6, I overheard servants talking about me. One said I should just kill myself, that death would be mercy. Part of me agreed, but another part, the part that was too stubborn to give Elder Gerald the satisfaction, kept surviving. Year 7, arthritis developed. My joints swelled, movement became agony beyond what the bands already caused. I was 19 years old with arthritis severe enough to cripple elderly wolves. Year 8, I lost all sensation in my fingers. Couldn't feel anything below my wrists. My hands became dead appendages attached to wrists that never stopped burning. Year 9, my bones started breaking. Fractured my left wrist from a simple fall because silver toxicity had destroyed bone density. The fracture didn't heal right. I was 21 when the pack healer told me I had maybe 5 years left. Year 10, I stopped hoping. Just woke up every morning, smelled my own flesh, burning, wrapped my wrist to hide the worst damage, and survived another day. Until AlphaKing Marcus saw me drop a tray of dishes and ask questions no one else had asked in a decade. Elena looked directly at Gerald. You told my parents this was mercy. That correction was better than execution. For 10 years I believed that. Believed I deserved the torture because I'd been born wrong. But yesterday when AlphaKing Marcus broke the locks and tore those bands off my wrists, when I felt metal that had burned me for 10 years finally separate from my flesh, I realized something. I wasn't born wrong. You were wrong about alpha females, about natural order, about what the moon goddess intended. I survived 10 years of torture you inflicted, and my wolf is still alive inside me, still clawing toward freedom. You failed to destroy what you called an abomination. You just proved that alpha females are stronger than your ideology. She stood displaying her scarred wrists to the entire hall. This is what tradition costs. This is what maintaining order means. 4 girls died from correction. I survived, and I'm done being grateful for torture. I'm done believing I'm a mistake. If my existence as alpha female threatens your pack structure, Elder Gerald, then your pack structure deserves to collapse. The testimony hit like physical force. Elena had spoken with calm certainty that carried more power than rage could have. She wasn't asking for sympathy or demanding apology. She was stating facts and daring anyone to justify what those facts represented. Gerald stood again, face flushed with defensive anger. You are an abomination. Removing the bands doesn't change biological reality. Alpha females disrupt pack hierarchy. Elena's wolf surged. Marcus felt it before he saw it. Alpha presence exploding outward from someone who'd been suppressed so long that emergence carried explosive force. Elena's body convulsed the shift, taking her with violent intensity as 10 years of caged wolf broke free. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles tore and rebuilt, and within seconds, Elena's human form gave way to something the pack hadn't seen since her first shift at age 12. Her alpha female wolf was massive, silver-white coat gleaming under hall lights, presence radiating dominance that made pack members instinctively lower their heads. She was larger than any female wolf should be, nearly matching Marcus's own alpha size. But more importantly, she was powerful. The alpha presence rolling off her could not be denied or dismissed as aberration. This was what the moon goddess had created, what Gerald had tried and failed to destroy. Marcus shifted immediately, his black wolf emerging to meet her as equal. He approached respectfully, touching nose to hers in traditional mate greeting. The bond between them flared bright destiny, recognizing itself alpha king and alpha female chosen by the moon goddess for purposes that transcended Gerald's limited worldview. The pack watched in stunned silence as Elena's wolf moved through the hall with confidence that belied 10 years of suppression. She stopped before Gerald, who'd gone pale with shock, and simply stared at him. The message was clear. You tried to erase me, and you failed. After several minutes, Elena shifted back to human form with effort that spoke to how difficult the transformation remained. She stood before Gerald naked and uncaring scars visible on her wrists and body language radiating hard-won certainty. "Still think I'm an abomination?" Gerald had no answer. His entire ideological foundation had just proven false before the assembled pack. Elena existed as alpha female. She was powerful. And far from disrupting pack order, her emergence had revealed the true disruption, Gerald's systematic torture of children who threatened his authority. Marcus shifted back to human asserting control through presence rather than wolf form. "Elder Gerald Blackwood, you are found guilty of ordering the torture and murder of 5 alpha female children. The evidence is overwhelming. The testimony is devastating. And your defense that tradition justified your actions is revealed as ideology masquerading as natural law." He turned to address the full pack. "You funded this through your silence. You enabled it through compliance. Every one of you who knew about the correction protocols and said nothing shares responsibility for 4 dead girls and Elena's decade of torture. That changes today. New laws effective immediately across all territories under my authority. Alpha females are legally protected. Suppression devices of any kind are illegal. Manufacturing, possessing, or using such devices constitutes criminal child abuse. Any pack currently engaging in alpha female suppression must report to Royal Enforcement for oversight of safe removal. Historical cases will be investigated. Families who lost daughters to correction protocols will receive reparations and formal apologies. And any elder who ordered such corrections will face the same tribunal process we've conducted here today." The hall erupted in mixed reactions, relief from younger wolves, outrage from traditional supporters of Gerald's policies, uncertainty from those caught between cultural loyalty and growing horror. Marcus let them process for several minutes before continuing. "Elder Gerald Blackwood, you are stripped of elder status and exiled from all packs under royal authority. You have until sundown to leave Ironwood territory. Return and face imprisonment." Gerald's face cycled through shock, denial, and rage. "You can't do this. I followed pack law. I protected Ironwood from chaos. The pack will support me, they believe, as I do." "Then let's see," Marcus addressed the assembled wolves. "All in favor of upholding Gerald's exile and accepting new protections for alpha females indicate now." Hands rose throughout the hall, slowly at first, then building to overwhelming majority. Not unanimous, but clear enough that Gerald's support had collapsed under weight of evidence. Even traditionalists couldn't defend child torture when confronted with Elena's scars and 4 families' grief. Gerald stared at the raised hands with betrayal written across his features. His pack, his authority, his certainty that tradition would prevail, all evaporating as wolves chose justice over ideology. Enforcement officers removed him from the hall, despite his continued protests about abominations and natural order. Marcus turned to Henrik Stone. "You enabled this through inaction. You held your own niece down while correction bans were installed. You prioritized pack stability over protecting children. For these failures, you're removed as alpha of Ironwood Pack. Pending investigation results, you may face additional charges." Henrik didn't protest. He simply nodded, broken by guilt and recognition that his cowardice had cost Rebecca's life and enabled Elena's torture. Enforcement removed him as well, leaving pack leadership vacuum that would need to be addressed. Martha Green, Robert Marsh, David Chen, you voted in favor of correction protocols. You share culpability for what Gerald ordered. House arrest, pending individual tribunals to determine your specific involvement in sentencing. The 3 elders were escorted out, leaving only Thomas Sterling among the elder council. The male had abstained from correction votes according to Danny's document analysis, though his silence had enabled the policies to continue. Marcus addressed him directly. "Elder Sterling, explain why you voted against correction protocols but never reported them to royal authority." Thomas stood with visible discomfort. "I believe the corrections were wrong, AlphaKing, cruel and unnecessary. But I lacked power to oppose Elder Gerald alone, and I feared that reporting to external authority would result in pack-wide punishment. I chose cowardice over conviction, and children died because of it." The honest assessment carried more weight than defensive justification would have. Marcus considered for a long moment before responding. "Your silence enabled Gerald's policies to continue. But unlike the others, you at least recognized the wrong, even if you lacked courage to act. You're removed from elder council but not exiled. Consider yourself on probation. Any future failure to report abuse results in permanent banishment. Thomas nodded acceptance, relief, and shame mixing in his expression. Marcus moved to the final reckoning, Elena's parents. Thomas and Diana Morrison. Elena's parents stood from where they'd been sitting throughout the tribunal, both looking decades older than their years. Thomas's face carried guilt and defensive justification warring for dominance. Diana appeared almost catatonic, the weight of her daughter's testimony having broken through whatever rationalizations she'd maintained for 10 years. Your daughter was 12 years old when you agreed to have her fitted with silver suppression bands. You watched them lock the metal on her wrists. You heard her scream. And 3 months later, you moved her to servants' quarters and stopped visiting. Explain. Thomas found his voice first. We were told correction was necessary, that the alternative was execution. We chose what we believed was the lesser evil. You chose torture over fighting for your child. Marcus's voice carried ice. You chose pack approval over protecting Elena. You chose comfort over confronting elder authority. And when living with the consequences became uncomfortable, you moved her out of sight. Diana finally spoke, voice hollow. We have other children, 2 younger daughters. After Elena's correction, we sent them to live with relatives in other packs. Couldn't risk them being tainted by association with an alpha female. The admission struck Elena visibly. Marcus saw her flinch, the additional betrayal cutting deeper than the decade of torture. Her parents hadn't just abandoned her, they'd protected her siblings while leaving her to suffer alone. You sent your acceptable children away, while your corrected daughter lived in servants' quarters being slowly destroyed by metal you'd agreed to have locked on her wrists. Marcus turned to Elena. Their punishment is yours to decide. Elena looked at her parents for long moment, emotions flickering across her face too quickly to catalog. Finally, she spoke with quiet finality. I don't want them executed or exiled. I want them to live with what they did. To wake every morning knowing they chose Pax standing over their daughter's life. To look at their other children and remember the one they sacrificed. I have no mother. I have no father. They died to me the day they moved me to servants' quarters and never looked back. Let them live as ghosts haunting their own choices. Marcus nodded. Thomas and Diana Morrison house arrest for 6 months, for you 1 year. For you, Diana, given your greater culpability. Mandatory counseling on parental responsibility. Reparations paid to Elena equal to 10 years of lost wages and medical expenses. You're forbidden from contact with Elena unless she initiates it. Diana collapsed, then finally breaking under accumulated guilt. Thomas caught her, both of them destroyed in different ways by consequences they'd enabled through cowardice. Enforcement officers escorted them out, leaving Elena alone at the witness stand, looking simultaneously freed and devastated. Marcus concluded the tribunal with final proclamations. Ironwood Pack is under royal oversight pending selection of new leadership. An interim alpha from my enforcement division will assume authority until proper elections can be held. All pack members are required to attend mandatory education on alpha female rights and royal protection laws. The families of Sarah Winters, Maya Chen, Rebecca Stone, and Julia Madsen will receive formal apologies and financial reparations. A memorial will be erected in their honor. And Elena Morrison will receive full pack support in her recovery and future endeavors. He looked across the assembled pack. You funded child torture through your dues. You enabled it through silence. Some of you knew exactly what was happening and said nothing. Others remained willfully ignorant. Both are forms of complicity. You don't get absolution today. You get the opportunity to do better going forward. Take it. The tribunal concluded with enforcement officers documenting proceedings and witness statements being finalized. Danny coordinated evidence transfer to secure storage. Sarah interviewed PAC members about cultural attitudes and how deeply Gerald's ideology had penetrated. Victor continued monitoring Elena's medical condition and preparing reports for other PACs that might have similar suppression protocols. Marcus found Elena in the medical wing several hours later, sitting on the examination table with her wrists freshly bandaged. She looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, the testimony having lifted burdens she'd carried since age 12. How are you holding up? I don't know. Her voice carried uncertainty. I thought I'd feel vindicated, but mostly I just feel tired, like I've been running for 10 years and finally stopped moving. Marcus sat in the chair across from her. You shifted during the tribunal, first time in a decade. How did it feel? Elena's smile was small but genuine, painful, terrifying, and absolutely right. My wolf is damaged. The suppression affected neural pathways made shifting difficult. But she's alive. We're both alive and we're both free. Victor says you'll need physical therapy for hand function, ongoing treatment for the arthritis and bone density issues. The nerve damage is permanent, but you can adapt to work around it. I know. I'm not whole and I never will be. But Marcus, I'm not in constant pain anymore. For the first time in 10 years, my wrists don't burn. I didn't think I'd ever experience that again. There's something else we need to discuss. Marcus pulled out his tablet, showing her the organizational structure he'd been developing. I'm establishing an Alpha Female Protection Unit Enforcement Division specifically focused on investigating and preventing the kind of abuse you survived. We'll need someone who understands the experience firsthand to lead it. Elena looked at the tablet, then at Marcus. You want me to lead protection of other alpha females. I want you to transform what happened to you into prevention for future children. You're the only alpha female who survived long-term suppression. Your perspective is invaluable. And Elena, you have strength that 10 years of torture couldn't break. That's exactly what this unit needs. She was quiet for a long time processing the offer. I don't know if I'm ready. I spent a decade being told I was an abomination. Can't just flip a switch and become advocate for alpha females when I barely believe I deserve to exist. You don't have to decide today. Take time to heal, to process. But when you're ready, the position is yours. Marcus stood to leave, then paused. Elena, you testified that your wolf was still clawing toward freedom, that you refused to give Gerald the satisfaction of dying. That's not someone who barely deserves to exist. That's someone who survived through pure stubborn will and deserves to thrive. After he left, Elena sat alone in the medical wing, staring at her bandaged wrists and feeling something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, maybe, or possibility. For 10 years she'd survived. Now she had to learn to live. 3 days after the tribunal, Marcus stood in what had been Elder Gerald's private study, now converted into Tactical Operations Center for the expanded investigation. Maps covered every wall, not just Ironwood territory, but the entire northern jurisdiction under his authority. Danny had marked 17 packs with red flags indicating potential alpha female suppression based on demographic analysis and anonymous tips that had flooded enforcement channels since news of the tribunal spread. Sarah worked at a corner desk coordinating interviews with packs, reporting historical correction cases. Her expression carried the grim determination of someone who'd spent career investigating child abuse and discovered the problem was orders of magnitude larger than initial assessments suggested. Victor occupied the medical station reviewing records from pack healers across the territory who'd been required to submit treatment documentation for any female shifters who died between ages 12 and 20 over the past 50 years. The numbers were staggering. 43 deaths across Marcus's jurisdiction that fit the pattern: young female shifters dying from organ failure, silver toxicity infection, or listed ambiguously as natural causes. Not all would prove to be suppressed alpha females, but the statistical clustering around first shift age range suggested systematic elimination that had operated beneath royal oversight for decades. Danny looked up from his computer. Boss, we've got a situation developing in Montana. Clearwater Pack Alpha there is resisting compliance with the new protection laws. Says his elder council has traditional authority over discipline matters and royal mandate doesn't supersede pack sovereignty. Marcus had been expecting resistance. Cultural change never happened smoothly, especially when it challenged power structures that had existed for generations. What's the specific issue? 14-year-old girl shifted last week, presented as alpha female. Pack elders ordered suppression bans. Parents contacted our hotline before installation happened. I've got enforcement teams standing by, but the alpha Derek Vance is threatening to consider royal intervention as an act of war. Get me Vance on secure line, now. The call connected within minutes, Derek Vance's voice carrying barely controlled aggression. AlphaKing Thorne, I understand you're threatening to invade my territory over internal discipline matter. Marcus kept his voice level despite the fury building in his chest. Alpha Vance, I'm enforcing laws that protect children from torture. Your elder council ordered suppression bans for a 14-year-old alpha female. That's illegal under royal protection statutes I established 3 days ago. Those statutes violate Pax sovereignty. My elders have authority over traditional discipline within Clearwater territory. You're overstepping your jurisdiction. Pax sovereignty ends where child abuse begins. You have two options. Comply with royal protection laws and allow my enforcement team to ensure that girl's safety or face charges for ordering torture of a minor. Choose quickly. Vance's voice hardened. You're making a mistake, Thorne. Other alphas won't stand for this interference. Traditional pack structure is foundation of our society. You're trying to dismantle it based on one emotional tribunal. I'm dismantling systematic child torture. If your traditional structure requires eliminating powerful females, then your structure deserves to collapse. Final warning, comply or face consequences. Then we're done talking. Clearwater Pack rejects your authority on this matter. Send your enforcement team and we'll respond appropriately. The call ended. Marcus looked at Danny. Full tactical deployment. I want overwhelming force, no casualties if possible. But Vance doesn't get to torture a child because he's invested in traditional hierarchy. Rules of engagement are clear, secure. The girl, first detain pack leadership. Second, and if anyone tries to install those bans, stop them with whatever force necessary. Danny was already coordinating the operation, pulling enforcement officers from Storm Haven and 3 neighboring territories that had quickly embraced the new protections. 15 trained enforcers armed with non-lethal weapons and clear mission parameters. Marcus would lead personally. This was too important to delegate. Sarah spoke up from her station. AlphaKing, if this goes violent, the backlash from traditional packs will be severe. They'll frame it as tyrannical overreach, say you're using royal authority to force cultural change through intimidation. They're right, I am forcing cultural change. The alternative is allowing children to continue being tortured in the name of tradition. Marcus checked his gear, military muscle memory taking over. Get me everything on Clearwater's layout entry points where the girl is likely being held where elders convene. We're doing this as precision operation, not invasion. Within 2 hours, the enforcement team was airborne in helicopters borrowed from federal contacts Marcus maintained from his military days. The tactical approach to Clearwater territory bypassed normal protocol of requesting entry permission. This was royal enforcement action, not diplomatic visit. Vance would either comply or face removal. They landed half a mile from Clearwater's pack house under cover of darkness, moving through forest with coordination that came from veterans who'd operated together across multiple combat zones. Marcus took point with Danny on his 6, Sarah managing communications, Victor ready to provide immediate medical care for the girl if she'd already been fitted with bands. The intelligence Sarah had gathered indicated the 14-year-old Emma Carson was being held in secure room in the pack house basement while elders prepared suppression bans. Her parents had reportedly tried to flee with her but been stopped by pack enforcers. Clearwater operated under tight elder control, Alpha Vance acting more as military commander than sovereign leader. Marcus's team reached the pack house perimeter without detection, thermal imaging showing 15 heat signatures inside, including clustered group in the basement that likely included Emma and her parents. Danny coordinated breach points while Marcus prepared entry authorization under Royal Emergency Authority. The assault happened in under 3 minutes. Enforcement officers breached simultaneously through 3 entry points, non-lethal rounds dropping Clearwater enforcers before they could mount organized resistance. Marcus moved directly to the basement, with 2 officers finding Emma and her parents locked in a bare room with silversmith equipment set up ominously in the corner. Emma was small for 14, terrified and defiant, in equal measure, silver blonde hair, and eyes that held the distinctive alpha gleam despite obvious fear. Her parents, Robert and Julie Carson, stood protectively in front of her, looking relieved and anxious at the enforcement team's arrival. Emma Carson, the girl nodded, voice steady despite trembling. Are you here to stop them from putting the bans on me? I'm AlphaKing Marcus Thorne. Yes, I'm here to stop them. You're under royal protection now. No one is putting bans on you or any other alpha female. Not in Clearwater, not anywhere in my territory. Julie Carson broke down crying with relief. Robert's jaw was set with grim satisfaction. We tried to leave. Take Emma somewhere safe. Alpha Vance's enforcers stopped us at the border, said we were stealing pack property by removing an uncorrected alpha female. Pack property. The phrase crystallized everything wrong with traditional pack culture's approach to alpha females, not people with rights, but problems requiring correction. Marcus felt his wolf demanding immediate violence against Vance, but maintained tactical discipline. Mission first: secure the girl and her family, then deal with pack leadership. Victor, full medical assessment. I want documentation that Emma is healthy and unharmed before we transport. He turned to the Carsons. You're coming with us to Storm Haven. Clearwater is not safe for alpha females under current leadership. We'll handle relocation and ensure Emma has proper training environment. Danny's voice came through comms. Boss, we've got Alpha Vance and 3 elders secured on main level. Minimal resistance once they realized we weren't negotiating. Found our suppression bands ready for installation, pure silver, similar design to Ironwood's. Marcus left Victor with the Carsons and moved to confront Vance. The Alpha was in his 40s, built like career military expression, mixing rage with grudging respect for the precision of the enforcement action. The 3 elders with him showed various degrees of fear and indignation. Alpha Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to torture a minor and resistance to royal authority. Your elder council faces the same charges. Clearwater Pack is under royal oversight, effective immediately. Vance's voice carried contempt despite his compromised position. You can't arrest me for enforcing traditional pack law on my own territory. This is overreach that every alpha in the Northern Territories will oppose. Then they can take it up with me at the Interterritorial Summit next month. Until then, the law is clear. Alpha females are protected. Suppression devices are illegal, and any pack leadership that tries to torture children gets removed and prosecuted. You chose to test those boundaries. This is the result. One of the elders, elderly female named Margaret Stone, spoke up with surprising venom. Alpha females are corruption of the natural order. The moon goddess designed males to lead and females to follow. That girl down there is a mistake that needs correction, and you're enabling her defiance of biological reality. Marcus stared at her. The only mistake here is ideology that requires torturing children to maintain itself. Elena Morrison wore suppression bands for 10 years in Ironwood Pack. 4 other alpha females died from similar corrections. I've seen the medical evidence, heard the testimony, documented the systematic destruction. If your natural order requires that level of suffering, Elder Stone, then your order is unnatural. Margaret's face flushed with defensive anger, but she had no response that could justify child torture once it was framed in those terms. The elders had built their worldview on abstractions, natural order, traditional hierarchy, moon goddess intentions. Marcus was forcing them to confront concrete reality of screaming children and grieving families. The enforcement team extracted Emma and her parents along with detained pack leadership, leaving interim authority in place under loyal enforcement officers from Storm Haven. The Clearwater operation took 4 hours start to finish successful, in that Emma was secured without installation of suppression bands, but Marcus knew the political fallout would be severe. He was right. Within 24 hours, 5 alphas from traditional packs filed formal protests about royal overreach. 2 threatened to withdraw from the Northern Territory Compact, claiming Marcus had violated sovereignty principles that held the alliance together. Conservative pack leaders across the jurisdiction began coordinating resistance to the alpha female protection laws, arguing that cultural traditions couldn't be legislated away through executive authority. Marcus addressed the backlash in video conference with the protesting alphas, making his position clear. You're welcome to protest my methods. You're welcome to argue about sovereignty boundaries, but you are not welcome to torture children in your territories. The protection laws are non-negotiable. Any pack that attempts to install suppression devices will face the same enforcement action Clearwater experienced. Alpha Richard Cross from Oregon's coastal region spoke for the opposition. AlphaKing, you are using isolated cases to justify massive cultural intervention. Yes, some correction protocols caused harm, but alpha females do pose legitimate challenges to pack hierarchy. Without clear male authority maintaining order, packs become unstable. Prove it. Show me one documented case of pack collapse caused by alpha female leadership. Actual evidence, not traditional assumption. Cross faltered, exchanging glances with other protesting alphas on the call. The historical record shows The historical record shows that alpha females were systematically eliminated before they could reach leadership positions. You can't claim they cause chaos when you've spent generations preventing them from existing long enough to lead. That's circular logic justifying atrocity. Marcus pulled up the data Victor had compiled. 43 deaths of young female shifters across the northern jurisdiction over 50 years. Statistical clustering around first shift age. Causes of death consistent with silver, toxicity, and suppression complications. If even half of those were alpha females killed by correction protocols, we're looking at 20 children murdered in the name of tradition. And those are just the ones we found so far. The numbers hit hard visual evidence that this wasn't an isolated problem, but systematic elimination operating across multiple packs. Some of the protesting alphas looked genuinely shocked. They'd known about corrections in abstract, but perhaps not the scope. You have 6 weeks to bring your packs into compliance with protection laws, Marcus continued. Self-report any historical correction cases, submit medical records for review, and if you currently have suppressed alpha females in your territories, contact enforcement for oversight of safe ban removal. Cooperate fully, and I'll work with you on cultural transition. Resist and face the consequences Vance is experiencing. He ended the call before they could mount further protests, knowing that authority worked best when backed by demonstrated willingness to enforce it. The Clearwater operation had proven he wasn't bluffing about intervention. Now traditional packs had to decide if maintaining torture protocols was worth confronting royal enforcement directly. Sarah entered his office with fresh intel. Boss, we're getting cooperation from unexpected sources. 12 packs have self-reported historical correction cases in the past day. 9 more have requested guidance on cultural education programs about alpha females. The younger generation is pushing back hard against elder resistance. They saw Elena's testimony, heard the victim families, and they're not comfortable with what their packs did. What about current active suppression? Anyone reporting alpha females wearing bands right now? 3 cases so far. Montana pack has 18-year-old who's worn bands for 6 years. Idaho pack has 24-year-old with bands on for 12 years. And Wyoming has 16-year-old bands for 4 years. All 3 packs are requesting medical oversight for safe removal. Marcus felt sick. 3 more survivors, 3 more decades of accumulated torture. Deploy Victor's medical team immediately. I want those bands off within 48 hours and full documentation of injuries. Sarah, coordinate with the families, make sure they understand the girls are victims, not abominations. And get me psych support for all 3. They're going to need extensive counseling. Over the following week, the protection laws began taking effect across the jurisdiction, despite ongoing resistance from traditionalist elements. The 3 active suppression cases were resolved with varying outcomes. The 18-year-old survived ban removal, but required intensive medical care for organ damage. The 24-year-old was in critical condition from 12 years of toxicity, and the 16-year-old was recovering well with Victor's team providing treatment. Marcus established the Alpha Female Protection Unit with temporary leadership until Elena was ready to assume the position. The unit operated out of Storm Haven with clear mandate: investigate, suspected suppression, provide sanctuary for at-risk alpha females, educate packs on new laws, and coordinate removal operations for any remaining active cases. The memorial for Ironwood's victims was erected in the pack's ceremonial grounds, where first shifts traditionally occurred. 5 names carved in black granite: Sarah Winters, Maya Chen, Rebecca Stone, Julia Madsen, and Elena Morrison, with the notation "survived" beside her name. The families attended the dedication ceremony, finding some measure of peace in having their daughters remembered and honored, rather than erased. Elena stood before the memorial afterward, touching her own name with complex emotions flickering across her face. Marcus joined her, respecting the silence until she was ready to speak. It's strange seeing my name with the others. They died. I lived. But we all suffered the same torture, carried the same shame. I don't know why I survived when they didn't. You survived because you were strong enough and stubborn enough to refuse Gerald the satisfaction. But Elena surviving doesn't mean you escaped unscathed. The scars you carry are evidence of what was done to you, not measures of your worth. She looked at her bandaged wrists, healing slowly but marked permanently. Victor says the nerve damage is permanent. I'll never have full hand function. The arthritis will worsen with age. My bones are compromised for life. I'm 22 and my body feels 60. And yet you're still here, still fighting, still choosing to transform what happened to you into protection for others. Elena had made her decision about the protection unit leadership 3 days ago, surprising everyone, including herself. Victor had warned she wasn't physically recovered enough to take on demanding position. Sarah had counseled waiting until psychological healing progressed further. But Elena had insisted with the same stubborn determination that kept her alive through 10 years of torture. Those 3 girls we just pulled bands off of, they need someone who understands. Not just intellectually understands, but knows what it feels like to wake up smelling your own flesh burning, to believe you're an abomination for so long that freedom feels wrong. They need living proof that survival is possible. She was right. Marcus had known it even before her declaration. The protection unit would be more effective with Elena leading because she embodied the reality that suppression didn't destroy what it tried to erase. Alpha females could survive, could recover, could thrive despite attempts to eliminate them. The training academy opened 6 weeks after the tribunal converted facility in Storm Haven that could house up to 20 alpha females in secure, supportive environment. Elena co-directed with Marcus handling trauma recovery and building confidence, while he managed tactical training and leadership development. The first cohort included Emma Carson from Clearwater, the 3 survivors from recent ban removals, and 7 newly shifted alpha females whose packs had reported their emergence for protection rather than correction. Marcus watched Elena work with the youngest student, 13-year-old named Sophie, who'd shifted 2 weeks ago and was terrified of her own power. Elena's approach was patient, drawing from personal experience to help Sophie understand that alpha presence wasn't curse requiring suppression, but gift requiring control and respect. Your wolf is strong. That's not bad or wrong, it's how the moon goddess made you. What we teach here is how to channel that strength, how to lead without dominating, how to balance power with wisdom. Sophie's voice trembled. But the elders in my pack said alpha females cause chaos, that we disrupt hierarchy. The elders were wrong. They confused power they couldn't control with power that shouldn't exist. You know what causes real chaos? Torturing children, eliminating leaders who threaten authority, creating culture where strength is punished if it comes in the female form. Elena showed Sophie her scarred wrists. This is what happens when people decide your existence is wrong. We're teaching you so no one can do this to you or anyone else ever again. The academy represented cultural shift that would take generation to fully integrate, but Marcus could see foundation being laid. Young alpha females learning to embrace their power rather than hide it. Packs slowly accepting that strong females strengthen rather than threaten pack structure. Elder councils beginning to understand that tradition required evolution, or it calcified into tyranny. Not everyone accepted the changes. 3 packs formally withdrew from the Northern Territory Compact, declaring independence rather than comply with protection laws. Marcus let them go. He couldn't force unity, and wolves who chose isolation over protecting children weren't worth the effort of maintaining alliance. Better clean break than festering resentment. The Interterritorial Alpha Summit occurred 2 months after the initial tribunal, bringing together pack leaders from across the northern jurisdiction to formally address the protection laws and their implementation. Marcus opened the summit by displaying the memorial names and reading testimony excerpts from victim families. Some alphas shifted uncomfortably, confronted with concrete evidence rather than abstract policy debate. Alpha Richard Cross, who'd initially opposed the laws, stood to speak. AlphaKing Thorne, I came to this summit prepared to argue against your intervention in pack sovereignty. But I've spent the past 6 weeks reviewing historical records from my own territory. We had 2 alpha female corrections in the last 20 years. Both girls died, one at 15, one at 17. I didn't connect their deaths to elder policy because I trusted that corrections were necessary. He paused, visibly struggling with guilt. I was wrong. My elders were wrong. We tortured children based on ideology that convinced us powerful females were threats rather than assets. I'm here to formally adopt your protection laws and request support in educating my pack about alpha females. Better late than insufficient, but I'm committed to ensuring no child suffers corrections in my territory again. Several other alphas echoed similar sentiments, combination of genuine moral reckoning and political calculation that compliance was less costly than resistance. Marcus accepted their conversions while remaining cautious. Cultural change motivated by fear of enforcement was better than no change, but it lacked the deep conviction that ensured lasting reform. The summit concluded with formal adoption of protection laws across 70% of the northern jurisdiction, holdouts limited to isolated traditional pacts that would eventually face choice between compliance or permanent separation from territorial alliance. Marcus established oversight committee to monitor implementation with Sarah leading investigations into suspected violations and Victor providing medical expertise for ban removal operations. Elena attended the summit's final session, speaking briefly about her experience in the Academy's mission. Her testimony was clinical rather than emotional, focusing on facts about suppression effects and recovery challenges. But her presence itself carried message that couldn't be ignored. Alpha female who'd survived torture now leading protection efforts, living proof that elimination strategies had failed. After the summit, as pack leaders departed and Stormhaven returned to normal operations, Marcus found himself in the Academy's training yard, watching Elena work with advanced students on combat techniques. She moved with careful precision, compensating for nerve damage that limited hand dexterity, but her tactical mind remained sharp and her alpha presence commanded respect without requiring physical dominance. Danny joined him, coffee in hand, and sardonic smile suggesting commentary incoming. You realize what you've done, right? You didn't just reform pack culture around alpha females. You created entirely new power structure with Elena as founding figure. Give it 20 years and she'll be historical legend, the survivor who transformed suffering into justice. Marcus considered that. 20 years is long time, a lot can happen. Yeah, but foundation is solid. Academy's training alpha females who'll become leaders in their packs. Protection unit is preventing new suppression cases. Cultural shift is happening faster than anyone expected because younger generation never bought into the abomination narrative once they saw actual evidence. Still have resistance. Traditional packs that will fight these changes for decades. Elders who genuinely believe alpha females threaten pack stability. Danny shrugged. Always going to be resistance to change. Question isn't whether everyone agrees, question is whether the trajectory is right. And boss, you've bent the trajectory toward justice. That matters. Victor approached with medical tablet expressions suggesting mixed news. AlphaKing update on the 24-year-old from Idaho, the one who'd worn bands for 12 years. She's not going to make it. Organ damage too extensive. We've got her comfortable, but she's dying. The weight of failure settled on Marcus's shoulders. They'd gotten to her too late, 12 years of suppression, causing damage that even band removal couldn't reverse. Does she have family? Parents deceased. Brother is with her now. She's coherent. Wanted me to tell you something. Marcus followed Victor to the medical wing where the young woman, Rachel Turner, lay in bed with her brother holding her hand. She was emaciated, skin gray with toxicity, but her eyes held clarity that suggested she'd made peace with dying. AlphaKing, her voice was barely whisper. Thank you for trying. I know it's too late for me, but you saved others. Emma from Clearwater, the girl from Montana. They won't die like I'm dying. Marcus sat beside her bed. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner, that you had to endure 12 years of torture before anyone intervened. Rachel smiled weakly. Not your fault. My pack believed corrections were necessary. They thought they were protecting pack stability. But AlphaKing, when I die, use it. Use my death to show what happens when suppression continues too long. Make sure no one else has to choose between torture and death because their wolf is too powerful. She died 3 hours later, her brother holding her hand while Elena kept vigil in the corner. Victor documented cause of death as organ failure from chronic silver toxicity, adding Rachel's case to the growing evidence that corrections weren't mercy, but slow execution. The memorial in Ironwood gained a sixth name, Rachel Turner, age 24, Idaho Pack. Elena stood before the expanded memorial with Marcus after the dedication ceremony, both silent in acknowledgement that victory was incomplete while bodies continued accumulating. 6 names so far. How many more will we find as the investigation expands? Marcus had no comforting answer. Historical cases will reveal more. Families who lost daughters decades ago. Children whose deaths were covered up or explained away. We're looking at potentially hundreds of victims across multiple generations. And the ones we save now, they're marked for life. Nerve damage, arthritis, organ complications. We can prevent new torture, but we can't undo what's already been done. No, but we can transform it. Turn survivors into advocates, use their scars as evidence, build system that prevents future children from experiencing the same. Rachel was right, her death matters because it demonstrates cost of inaction. Every name on this memorial, including yours, represents choice between protecting vulnerable or maintaining comfortable traditions. Elena touched her name on the memorial stone. I survived. Sarah, Maya, Rebecca, Julia, and Rachel didn't. That's arbitrary luck, not virtue on my part. I could easily be dead like them. But you're not. You're alive, leading protection efforts, training alpha females who'll never know suppression. That matters, Elena. Your survival matters. She was quiet for a long time before responding. Then I'll make it matter, for all of them. The protection unit expanded over the following months, eventually encompassing 40 enforcement officers across the northern jurisdiction with specialized training in alpha female cases. The academy graduated its first cohort, 10 alpha females who returned to their packs as living examples that powerful females strengthen rather than threaten pack culture. 3 of the graduates assumed leadership positions within their packs, working alongside male alphas in partnerships that demonstrated complementary strength rather than competitive hierarchy. Sarah's investigations uncovered 17 additional historical suppression cases, bringing total documented victims to 60 across 50 years. Not all families wanted to pursue justice against their packs. Some had made peace with loss years ago and preferred to leave past undisturbed. But others found catharsis in formal recognition that their daughters had been victims rather than abominations requiring correction. The cultural shift accelerated as younger wolves rejected elder ideology, creating generational divide that sometimes fractured pack unity. Marcus mediated numerous disputes between traditional elders and reform-minded younger members, trying to facilitate change without destroying pack structure entirely. It was delicate balance, respecting pack sovereignty while enforcing minimum standards that protected vulnerable members. Elena's relationship with her parents remained non-existent despite Thomas and Diana's completion of house arrest and counseling. They'd sent letters requesting forgiveness, attempting reconciliation with their surviving daughter. Elena returned every letter unopened, maintaining boundaries she'd established during the tribunal. Marcus respected her choice while privately acknowledging the tragedy of family destroyed by ideology. Her siblings, 2 younger sisters, reached out independently, wanting to meet the sister they'd been protected from. Elena agreed cautiously, the reunion complicated by guilt on their part and resentment on hers. They'd been sent away to preserve them from taint of association while she'd suffered alone. But they were also children when those decisions were made, not responsible for parental choices, even if they'd benefited from them. Marcus observed one of the sibling meetings from distance, watching Elena navigate complex emotions with her sisters. They were 19 and 21, both Omega presentation, both carrying survivor guilt for having been saved while their older sister was tortured. The conversation was stilted, awkward, but genuine, not instant reconciliation, but foundation for potential relationship if Elena chose to build it. Think she'll forgive them eventually? Danny asked from beside Marcus. Her sisters, maybe. They were children. Her parents. Marcus shook his head. Some betrayals are too fundamental for forgiveness. Thomas and Diana chose pack approval over protecting their daughter. Then they protected their other children while leaving Elena to suffer. That's not mistake you apologize away. A lot of families are going to be processing similar guilt as the investigation continues. Parents who agreed to corrections, siblings who were spared. How do you reconcile that? You don't really. You acknowledge it, try to make amends if possible, and live with the weight. Some guilt should be carried, its appropriate consequence for enabling child torture, even if you believed you were doing right thing at the time. A year after the initial tribunal, Stormhaven hosted anniversary commemoration of the protection laws. PAC representatives from across the northern jurisdiction attended, including several from traditional PACs that had initially resisted but eventually complied. The event featured testimony from survivors' family members of victims and pack leaders who transformed their territories to embrace alpha females as valued members rather than threats requiring correction. Elena delivered keynote address standing before hundreds of wolves with her scarred wrists visible and her alpha presence radiating confidence earned through survival. I wore silver suppression bands for 10 years. They were locked on my wrists when I was 12 years old because Elder Gerald Blackwood decided I was an abomination. 4 other girls died from similar corrections. I survived, but I'll carry scars for the rest of my life, physical, psychological, permanent. The protection laws AlphaKing Thorne established didn't erase what happened to us. Rachel Turner still died from 12 years of suppression. Sarah, Maya, Rebecca, and Julia are still dead. I still wake up sometimes expecting to smell my own flesh burning. Laws can prevent future torture, but they can't undo past suffering. But they can ensure meaning. Every alpha female who shifts now does so knowing she's protected, not condemned. Every family can celebrate their daughter's power rather than mourning it. Every pack can embrace strength in female form rather than eliminating it through torture disguised as correction. That's what these laws achieved. They transformed arbitrary suffering into foundation for justice. We honor the dead by protecting the living. We remember Sarah, Maya, Rebecca, Julia, and Rachel by ensuring no child faces the same fate. And we build culture where alpha females are celebrated rather than corrected, where power is nurtured rather than suppressed, where the moon goddess's blessings are recognized regardless of the form they take. The commemoration concluded with expansion of the memorial to include all documented victims across the northern jurisdiction, 63 names carved in black granite, representing 6 decades of systematic elimination finally ended through royal intervention and cultural transformation. Elena stood before the completed memorial with Marcus, both acknowledging the weight of what had been lost and the responsibility of what had been gained. 63 names, probably more we haven't found yet. That's the cost of tradition that required elimination to maintain itself. Marcus nodded, and it's why the protection laws are non-negotiable. Some traditions deserve to die because they're built on suffering. Alpha female suppression was never about natural order or pack stability. It was about maintaining male authority by eliminating females who threatened it. That ends permanently. Elena looked at her name among the survivors section separate from the deceased, but connected through shared experience of torture. You gave me something I didn't think I'd ever have future without constant pain purpose being just surviving. I don't know how to thank you for that. You're thanking me by leading protection unit, by training academy students, by being living proof that suppression fails. Elena, you transformed your suffering into strength that's protecting hundreds of alpha females who'll never experience what you endured. That's more valuable than any gratitude. She smiled, expression mixing hard-won peace with permanent scar tissue of trauma. Then I'll keep doing it. For Sarah and Maya and Rebecca and Julia and Rachel. For every name on this memorial. For every alpha female who'll shift in the future and be celebrated instead of corrected. I survived, so I'll make survival meaningful. They left the memorial as sun set over Stormhaven, casting long shadows across names carved in stone. The protection laws had transformed northern jurisdiction culture in ways that would ripple for generations. Alpha females would grow up knowing they were valued rather than vilified, powerful rather than defective, blessed rather than cursed. 63 lives lost to ideology that prioritized comfort over justice. But hundreds, eventually thousands, saved through systematic reform that declared child torture unacceptable, regardless of traditional justification. Marcus had bent the arc of pack culture toward justice through combination of enforcement action and demonstrated willingness to dismantle authority structures that enabled abuse. Not every pack had embraced the changes willingly. Not every elder accepted that tradition required evolution. But the trajectory was clear. Suppression of alpha females was ending across the northern jurisdiction, replaced by protection and celebration of power, the moon goddess granted, regardless of gender. Elena Morrison had worn silver bands for 10 years, survived torture that killed 4 others, and emerged as foundational figure in cultural transformation that would protect generations of alpha females from similar fate. Her scars remained permanent physical reminder of what tradition had cost, but they'd become symbols of survival rather than shame, evidence rather than correction, foundation for justice, rather than justification for suffering. The silver bands were gone. The memory remained. And that memory ensured no child would feel that burning again.